Chapter 1791. Every spatial crack caused people's hearts to tremble in fear. Even the bright moon sword saints didn't dare to face it head-on. Luckily, the spatial cracks only appeared in the sky. It was absolutely safe below. Otherwise, no one would dare to stand there. A terrifying aura and a world-shaking sharpness constantly shot out from the Black God Greatsword. The energy that had been accumulated for thousands of years seemed to be released at this moment. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the Black God Greatsword's sharp aura. The Black God Greatsword, which was thousands of meters tall, seemed to be constantly being tempered and condensed under the sharp aura, turning into a solid entity. Pressure, an unprecedented pressure, spread out from the Black God huge sword. It covered all directions and landed on everyone's bodies. It was like an invisible mountain was pressing down on them. Even Chu Mu felt that his body was slightly heavier, let alone the cultivators who were weaker than him. They all circulated their sword origin and released their auras to resist the pressure of the Black God huge sword. No one retreated. The cultivators who came here were at least at the early stage of the seventh sky of the Wangu realm. In other words, they were at least at the early stage of the seven-star saint realm. Facing this kind of pressure, they were able to resist. Of course, this was also because the Black God huge sword wasn't targeting them directly. If the Black God huge sword was targeting them directly, even the 5 bright moon sword saints wouldn't be able to withstand it. No one said anything. They all looked up and circulated their sword origin to release their auras to resist the pressure. They all had a feeling that the Black God mysterious realm was about to open. Rumble! Accompanied by countless spatial fissures, pitch-black arcs of lightning leaped about and condensed into black bolts of lightning. These bolts of lightning seemed capable of absorbing all the light in the world. The moment they appeared, the light in the world immediately dimmed as if night was about to descend. The terrifying black lightning was like a black dragon swimming in the sky. It was actually able to pass through the spatial cracks without being damaged. This scene made everyone's hearts jump. The aura that came out of the spatial cracks was enough to make people despair. The black dragon-like lightning could pass through them freely. This meant that the black dragon-like lightning was even more terrifying than the spatial crack. Everyone could not help but rejoice once again. Chu Mu stared closely at one of the black evil dragon thunderbolts. He could keenly feel a very unique aura rippling within the black thunderbolt. This was an aura he had never felt before. It was very unique and also very terrifying. It was frightening. There was no sign of life. All living things in the world more or less contained some life force. However, Chu Mu couldn't feel any life force from the black evil dragon-like lightning. There wasn't even a sliver. This kind of aura was similar to the aura of destruction. However, it was even more terrifying than destruction. It was simply the destruction of destruction. It had reached the pinnacle of destruction. Everything that was affected by it would be destroyed and completely disappear from the world. What a terrifying power! Chu Mu couldn't help but feel horrified in his heart, and then he revealed a yearning. If I'm able to comprehend this energy and condense it into sword intent, as he thought of this, his heart palpitated with excitement. If he could master this terrifying power and cultivate it into his sword intent, then the power of his sword intent would definitely rise to another level, and his strength would definitely become even more powerful. After all, he had 2 sword souls and 2 sword intents. One of them was the eternal sword soul, which contained the eternal sword intent. The other was an ordinary sword soul, which also contained an ordinary sword intent. The eternal sword intent was indeed the top existence among sword intent. It was very high-end and mysterious. However, in terms of destructive power, the eternal sword intent was actually not outstanding. Of course, this was only relative. Chu Mu was sure that if he could get the power of the black evil dragon thunderbolt and cultivate it into his sword soul and sword intent, its level would definitely not be inferior to that of the eternal sword intent. Moreover, its destructive power would definitely surpass that of the eternal sword intent. Rush up. Chu Mu abandoned this idea as soon as it popped up in his head. Rushing up was simply playing with his life. Not to mention whether he could obtain that kind of power if he rushed up, just a slight ripple from the spatial cracks that kept appearing would be enough to kill him. Furthermore, even if he avoided the space cracks and came into contact with the Black Thunderbolt, the power was not something that he could bear. He would be turned into ashes in an instant. Why don't I try my spiritual energy? Chu Mu said to himself. He condensed his spiritual energy into a beam and released it instantly. In an instant, the beam of spiritual energy shot up into the sky and rose a few thousand meters in the blink of an eye. A space crack suddenly appeared. Coincidentally, Chu Mu's spiritual energy could not dodge in time and was directly affected by the space crack and swallowed up. The terrifying power attacked. Chu Mu's expression changed, and he hurriedly cut off the connection with his spiritual energy so that he would not be affected by the power of the space crack. Losing a bit of spiritual energy was nothing. After all, it could be recovered quickly. However, the power of the space crack made Chu Mu fearful. When Chu Mu released his spiritual energy, it naturally caused some subtle fluctuations. Most cultivators would not be able to detect it, but a few experts could sense it. Bai Chen and the others looked at Chu Mu, somewhat puzzled. However, experts like Lin Zhentong sneered, secretly thinking that this lad was courting death. Chu Mu frowned. After a while, he released another beam of spiritual energy. Last time, he was not prepared. This time, after repeated simulations and entering the realm of emptiness, his senses were more than 10 times clearer. If he failed again on the second try, he could only give up. This time, the speed of his spiritual energy was not as fast and was even more careful. When a space crack appeared, Chu Mu immediately felt an intense sense of danger. He hurriedly controlled his spiritual energy to avoid it and continue upward. This feeling was like dancing on the tip of a knife. It was incomparably dangerous and exciting. Chu Mu had no choice but to focus. Zhao Wuji's figure flashed and appeared beside Chu Mu, standing properly. Following that, Bai Chen also took a step forward and appeared on the other side of Chu Mu. Their purpose in doing so was very clear: to act as protectors. However, they did not understand what Chu Mu was doing. Of course, they did not know whether Chu Mu could protect himself or not. They had to help him. Zhao Wuji acted as protector because Chu Mu did not blame him for his failure in the challenge back then. As for Bai Chen, it was because he thought that Chu Mu was a good opponent. Chu Mu could sense the two's actions. Although he was originally focused, he still paid attention to his surroundings. Once someone tried to harm him, he would immediately abandon his spiritual energy. Now it was good. He could focus on controlling his spiritual energy. With more focus, it was naturally easier to control it. Xiao Chun continuously dodged the spatial cracks and headed upwards, approaching the black lightning. Finally, Chu Mu's beam of spiritual energy came into contact with a black lightning bolt that looked like an evil dragon. The moment they came into contact, Chu Mu immediately felt an indescribable power of extreme destruction rapidly shatter his god's soul. No, it wasn't shatter, it was strangely annihilated, completely obliterating it into nothingness. In an instant, an extremely strong sense of danger emerged. This sense of danger was even stronger than when Chu Mu was facing a powerful enemy of an absolute expert. Without any hesitation, Chu Mu immediately cut off the remaining small portion of his spiritual energy. Before he could let out a sigh of relief, his hair stood on end, and his hair stood on end. Even his soul was trembling. That terrifying aura actually followed the trajectory of his spiritual energy and shot towards Chu Mu. Fast, too fast, indescribably fast. In an instant, before even a bright moon sword saint could react, that aura had already followed the trajectory of his spiritual energy and shot into Chu Mu's spiritual world. It was too fast, and Chu Mu could not react at all. With such speed, not to mention Chu-Mu, even a bright moon sword saint would not be able to detect it. Even the 7 kings only sensed it in an instant and could not react in time. That aura was very faint, to the point that it was difficult to distinguish. However, it was also very terrifying. A faint aura entered Chu-Mu's spiritual world. Immediately, Chu-Mu's spiritual world began to tremble, and the wind and clouds began to surge. The strands of power of laws were rapidly obliterated by this tiny aura, vanishing into nothingness. The power of the 5 laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth continued to grow and multiply. In less than 10 breaths of time, it completely disappeared. Then, the power of the law of lightning also disappeared under that aura. Chu-Mu's spiritual energy could not get close at all, because once it got close, it would immediately be obliterated by that aura. How can this be? Chu-Mu was extremely shocked. Terrifying, it was simply too terrifying. It was just a very faint aura, but it contained such terrifying power. It actually destroyed his power of laws and the power of laws. Although the power of laws was no longer of much use to him now, seeing the power of laws that he had painstakingly comprehended in the past being obliterated without leaving any trace behind was still a very uncomfortable feeling. What should I do? Chu-Mu's mind spun rapidly, and he did not fall into chaos because of this. Think of a way. He had to think of a way to resolve this matter. Otherwise, all the power in his spiritual world would be obliterated by this strand of power. At that time, even his soul would not be spared. Under that aura, the power of the law of wind was obliterated and vanished without a trace. Then, the power of the law of time was obliterated as well. Soon, all the power of laws in Chu-Mu's spiritual world vanished. Only the last strand of the power of the law of space still emitted a faint light. Chapter 1792. The power of the law of space could not be destroyed. Although Chu-Mu felt that it was a pity that the other law powers had disappeared, they were no longer of much use to him. However, the spatial law powers were related to his portable small space. Once they disappeared, the portable small space would also disappear. In his portable mini-space, there was still the crystal coffin of the sword spirit of the void, as well as some other important treasures. Once the power of the law of space disappeared, the portable mini-space would also disappear. At that time, everything in it would also disappear. No one knew where they would go. However, what could he do to preserve the power of the law of space? At this time, the subtle but terrifying aura had already spread to the last bit of the law of space. The void's secret tome trembled and released a strong light, illuminating Chu-Mu's entire spiritual world. The power of the void's secret tome resisted the subtle and terrifying aura for a moment. This gave Chu-Mu hope. However, the power of the void's secret tome was being eaten away at an extremely fast speed. The trembling of the void's secret tome became more and more obvious. It seemed that it would not be able to hold on for long. Once the power of the void's secret tome was eaten away, even the void's secret tome would not be spared. In the end, the void's secret tome was not a physical object. It was just an illusory existence. It was a kind of thing that was condensed and constructed with special power for inheritance. The power of the spirit cannot resist it. The power of the primordial spirit cannot resist it either. Chu-Mu's mind was constantly spinning at an unimaginable speed as he tried to think of a solution. If the void's secret tome disappeared, the power of the law of space would also disappear. At that time, it would be other things that would suffer, such as his primordial spirit, sword soul, and sword essence. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. Sword soul. Sword essence. Chu-Mu immediately caught the idea. I have sword essence. I have eternal sword essence. My eternal root bone is indestructible and immortal. Maybe, Chu-Mu seemed to see hope. At this moment, the light of the secret void codex had already been devoured. The terrifying aura had already touched the body of the secret void codex. The secret void codex kept shaking and the light on its body became very unstable. Chu Mu hurriedly mobilized the Eternal Sword Intent and split out a strand of Eternal Sword Intent power, shooting it towards the faint aura. In an instant, the Eternal Sword will came into contact with the terrifying aura, but it was not immediately destroyed. On the contrary, it was able to resist it for a while. Chu Mu's eyes instantly lit up. Although the Eternal Sword Intent was still obliterated after a few breaths and disappeared without a trace, he saw a sliver of hope. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, Chu Mu would definitely not give up. This was a way to save himself. At this moment, the secret tome of the void was further affected. Its light started to weaken. Chu Mu knew that the void secret codex had also been damaged. Chu Mu could accept the fact that the secret void codex had been destroyed. However, he could not afford to lose the power of the law of space. He immediately mobilized more Eternal Sword Intent and split it into 2 strands. They attacked from the left and right, as if he was using a sword technique to attack. After 10 breaths, the 2 strands of Eternal Sword Intent were also obliterated. However, Chu Mu was keenly aware that the faint aura seemed to have disappeared a little. Consumption. His power was being consumed, but the aura was also being consumed. If Chu Mu had only seen a glimmer of hope before, then now, this hope was magnified. He mobilized the power of the Eternal Sword Intent time and time again to attack the aura. Although it was obliterated time and time again, the aura was indeed weakening in Chu Mu's perception. Not long after, the void secret tome had already dissipated and completely disappeared. Chu Mu could not help but feel a sense of loss. However, he did not have the time to experience it. Instead, he constantly mobilized the power of Eternal Sword Intent to consume that sliver of aura. With the consumption, half of Chu Mu's Eternal Sword Intent was also consumed. The Eternal Sword Intent contained a trace of eternal power. It was not much, but the eternal power was infinitely mysterious. It could not be directly reflected in destructive power, but it had an amazing effect in terms of protection. The power of destruction and the power of immortality belonged to the same level of power. One was superior and the other was inferior. Now, the power of destruction and the power of destruction belonged to the same level of power. However, the power of immortality that Chu Mu had mastered was still very small. Now, his level was too low. It was already a great opportunity for him to obtain a trace of the power of immortality and refine it into the Eternal Sword Intent. He could not cultivate it directly. Otherwise, if the power of immortality contained in his Eternal Sword Intent was more tyrannical, it would be enough to fight against the ultimate power of destruction. He would not have to use such a method of consumption. The difference between the two was obvious. That trace of ultimate power of destruction, although more than the power of immortality that Chu Mu had mastered, could not be replenished after it was consumed. It was like an isolated army. On the other hand, Chu Mu had mastered the power of immortality. Although it was very small, it could take a period of time to recover after it was consumed. Under this situation, Chu Mu gradually gained the upper hand. Seeing that most of the aura of ultimate power of destruction had been consumed, and only a small part was left, Chu Mu suddenly had a thought. An even bolder idea suddenly popped up in his mind. The destructive power of this power was extremely tyrannical and terrifying. It was the first time he had seen something like this in his life. Its level was also comparable to the power of immortality. It was an extremely high-end power. In that case, could he master it? Looking at the other sword soul, he immediately mobilized the ordinary sword intent in it. Under the activation, the entire sword intent instantly shot out. It was like a divine sword that had been tempered thousands of times, piercing towards the remaining trace of ultimate power of destruction. In an instant, it hit its target. The ordinary sword intent directly absorbed the trace of aura. As soon as it was absorbed, Chu Mu immediately felt that his ordinary sword intent was being eaten away from the inside. It began to collapse and be destroyed. Chu Mu was extremely calm. He was not surprised at all. He had already expected this. The sword intent quickly entered the sword soul. With the support of the sword soul, it immediately became much more stable. It had a greater restraint on the trace of ultimate power of destruction. Immediately, Chu Mu mobilized the eternal sword soul. He approached the ordinary sword soul and mobilized the eternal sword intent. It suspended above the ordinary sword soul and released the aura of the eternal sword intent. It penetrated into the ordinary sword soul and into the ordinary sword intent, suppressing the trace of ultimate power of destruction. With the suppression of the eternal sword intent, the trace of ultimate power of destruction's destruction of the ordinary sword intent was reduced to the lowest point. The ordinary sword intent's recovery speed kept up. The two sides barely managed to maintain a balance. Good. In this way, the ordinary sword intent that has been destroyed will disappear. It will recover and become whole again. After a long time, the ordinary sword intent will be affected by the trace of ultimate power of destruction. It will gradually change and eventually become a new and more powerful sword intent, Chu Mu thought to himself. He was extremely happy. All kinds of power of law and rules of the void had disappeared. In the end, he had exchanged it for an extremely powerful sword intent. It was very worthwhile. The disappointment in his heart was swept away. However, Chu Mu was somewhat speechless. In the current situation, his eternal sword intent and ordinary sword intent would not be able to be used for a period of time. In other words, his strength would be reduced because he could not use sword intent. He estimated that his strength would fall to the level of an ordinary peak 9-star saint. With his early 7th sky of the ancient era cultivation, having the strength of a peak 9-star saint was very shocking. However, Chu Mu felt that it was far from enough. However, when the new sword intent appears, my strength will definitely rise again from my original foundation. Chu Mu thought to himself. The feeling of being filled with hope was very good. Many thanks, Brother Bai and Brother Zhao. Chu Mu's consciousness turned from the inside out. He immediately spoke and clasped his hands at Bai Chen and Zhao Wuji. Bai Chen nodded. His figure flashed and he returned to the Silver Mansion's camp. Zhao Wuji waved his hand. Brother Chu, don't be like this. I didn't do anything. Some people who knew Zhao Wuji opened their eyes wide. He was a very arrogant person. At this moment, there was no arrogance at all. No one knew that in this short period of time, Chu Mu's spiritual world had undergone an unimaginable change. He had spent a lot of time comprehending and tempering the power of laws. In the end, only the power of the law of space was left. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to protect his personal space, Chu Mu probably wouldn't have put in so much effort to protect it. Chu Mu's sword intent was also temporarily unable to be used due to various reasons. His offensive power had dropped by a level. However, at this moment, Chu Mu felt a very relaxed feeling. It wasn't a feeling of relaxation in his body, but in his consciousness. It was a feeling of relaxation in his soul. It had to be known that comprehending the power of heaven and earth required one's soul to bear it. The more power of heaven and earth there was, the greater the burden. Hence, when the power of laws disappeared, the burden on Chu Mu's soul lessened a lot. Naturally, he felt relaxed. At this moment, as the Black God Greatsword's terrifying sharpness charged forward, the countless spatial cracks in the sky seemed to be connected. The streaks of black lightning gradually became orderly. Following this, a black vortex gradually appeared in the sky and gradually expanded. It was pitch black like the mouth of a giant beast. It made one's heart turn cold. Only when the pitch-black vortex had expanded to 1,000 feet did it finally stop. Numerous pitch-black thunderbolts swam in the surroundings like evil dragons, causing the pitch-black vortex to continuously stabilize. The spatial crack no longer appeared. The gate to the Black God's secret realm has appeared. Those with a quota may enter. A voice rang out. Following this, 5 figures soared into the sky. They stood under the black vortex in 5 different directions. Chapter 1793. The 100-zhang black vortex was like a giant millstone that could crush heaven and earth. Boundless and vigorous, extreme destruction and endless growth. An extremely terrifying suction force spread out from the pitch-black vortex and went straight down. 5 average-sized figures hovered in the air below the black vortex, exuding a majestic aura. Behind them were 5 giant illusory figures that exuded a frightening aura. They were the 5 experts from the 5 Castellan manors, 5 bright moon sword saints. Below them, the 5 Castellan manors guards also flew up one by one, spreading out in 5 different directions. The hierarchy was strict and distinct, completely eliminating the possibility of others trying to fish in troubled waters. Only those with a quota could enter. Without a quota, they could only watch from the outside. If it was possible, the more people that entered the Black Mystery Realm, the better it would be. However, that was not the case. The resources to raise one's strength inside the Black Mystery Realm were fixed. If too few people entered, they would not be able to make full use of it. If too many people entered, it would not be enough. The first to enter were the 5 Castellan Manors geniuses, led by 2 Qianjun, Bai Chen, and the other Star Realm geniuses. They soared into the air and entered the black vortex in the blink of an eye. Each of the 5 Castellan Manors had 10 quotas. Following them were the powerful sects that were second only to the 5 Castellan Manors. Forces like the 3 Sacred Sects and Evil Dragon Hall had fewer quotas, each having 8 quotas. Following them were 6 quotas, 4 quotas, and finally 2 quotas. These people who entered came from various forces. Finally, it was Chu Mu and the other freelance sword cultivators who had obtained 10 quotas at the auction. Other than them, secluded geniuses like Zhao Wuji also had the qualifications to enter. Perhaps they had obtained the quotas through other means. When Chu Mu and the others flew up and were about to enter the black vortex, an 8 or 9 Star Realm mid-level Saint Realm expert leaped into the air. Using a mysterious movement technique, he passed through the 5 Castellan Manors guards' blockade at an astonishing speed, catching up to Chu Mu and the others, wanting to enter the black vortex with them. This person did not have a quota, but wanted to fish in troubled waters to enter the Black Mystery Realm. Courting death. The golden sword radiance was like a blooming lotus, tearing apart the illusory figure. From the shattered shadow, an even more secretive shadow shot out, and its speed suddenly doubled. Destroy! The second bright moon sword saint made a move. He flicked his finger, and a streak of fire shot out like a shooting star. It gathered the fiercest flames in the world and followed a mysterious trajectory in the sky. It seemed slow, but it was actually very fast. It hit the shadow that was faster and more hidden. A small spark instantly turned into a prairie fire. In an instant, the illusory figure was burned. A miserable shriek reverberated in the sky, causing people to tremble in fear. From the moment the illusory figure appeared to the moment it was burned and disappeared, it took less than 2 breaths of time. The amazing movement technique surprised Chu Mu and the others. If it weren't for the bright moon sword saints guarding the place, that person would have succeeded in fishing in troubled waters. Trespassers without a quota. Kill without mercy. The bright moon sword saint who made a move looked down. His eyes shot out a sharp light, and layers of ripples appeared in the void. It was as if he could burn the void and everything in the world with a single glance. Such power made some of the people below who wanted to make a move give up on the idea of fishing in troubled waters. Chu Mu jumped into the pitch-black whirlpool. It was as if night had fallen, and he couldn't see anything. He could only feel traces of extremely powerful aura surrounding him. This aura was cold and tyrannical, and it kept attacking his body. The world seemed to be spinning, and the chilly wind roared. Flames burned the sky. His body felt like it was in a furnace, and it was being tempered. It was as if 1,000 years had passed in the blink of an eye. His feet landed on the ground, and the scenery in front of him became clear. The dry land was scorched, and smoke rose into the sky. It was as if an endless volcano was erupting. Black and red colors intertwined in the sky. It was gloomy and oppressive, as if it could collapse at any time. Pitch-black cracks appeared and disappeared everywhere, and it emitted a despairing terror. It was like purgatory, and it was like the end of the world. Chu Mu had imagined the Black Mystery Realm, but he didn't expect it to be so desolate and harsh. It was like a purgatory. It was impossible to fly in this place. The yuan qi of heaven and earth here was very thin, and the power of heaven and earth was very chaotic. Cultivators who didn't have enough comprehension would find it hard to control and display their strength. However, those who could enter the Black Mystery Realm were either experts or true geniuses. Therefore, the chaos of the power of heaven and earth wasn't much of a hindrance to them. The only thing worth noting was that the thin yuan qi of heaven and earth couldn't help them recover their yuan qi. They could only rely on elixirs. Therefore, these people had prepared a large amount of elixirs to recover their yuan qi. In the desolate and harsh environment, the aura of coldness and tyranny intertwined. It rippled in the void and suddenly became stronger. "Another damned human has come in. Kill them all." A strange voice sounded. It was a language that was similar to human language, but not human at the same time. Chu Mu could vaguely understand it. Soon after, numerous figures swiftly flew over from afar and launched fierce attacks. These figures looked a little like humans. They had a head, a body, and 4 limbs. They stood like humans and walked on 2 feet. However, they weren't humans. They had horns on their heads, and in addition to 2 eyes, there was a 3rd eye between their eyebrows. Their faces were ferocious, and their bodies were covered in thumb-sized scales. Their arms were as thick as their thighs, and they were very long. Their sharp claws seemed to be able to tear through everything. These monsters were generally more than 2 meters tall. There were a total of 4 of these monsters. After they surrounded Chu Mu, they immediately attacked. Their meter-long arms clawed out fiercely, and the space was torn apart like a piece of cloth, leaving behind cold marks. Fierce and direct, tragic and tyrannical. A fierce aura spread out and attacked. Such an attack was so sudden and so fast that an ordinary 7-star saint expert couldn't dodge it and would be torn apart immediately. However, Chu Mu was no ordinary 7-star saint. His eyes flashed. He didn't even draw his sword. Instead, he put his fingers together and slashed out. It seemed slow, but it was incomparably fast. It was a sharp contrast to the claws of his opponent. The intersection of speed and slowness created a gap. A slight puffing sound was heard, and a ray of sword light swept through the air, turning into a ring that cut through the air. Immediately, it changed from tough to soft, like 4 threads intertwining with each other, layer by layer. The bodies of the 4 monsters trembled, and their movements suddenly stopped. No matter how hard they tried, they could not move. Sword chi threads. This was an extremely brilliant technique. It was a new technique that Chu Mu had grasped after his sword mastery had continuously increased. He could activate his own sword origin and transform it into sword aura. Then, he could transform the incomparably sharp sword aura into a thread. After the sword-like threads entangled the 4 monsters, Chu Mu studied them carefully. He knew that these monsters had a name. They were called the ominous demons of the mystic realm. The ominous demons of the mystic realm were the only living creatures in the black mystic realm. They were also the only intelligent creatures. Their language was similar to human language, and it was hard to understand. Trapped by Chu Mu's sword chi, the 4 ominous demons suddenly screamed and struggled. They exerted force and twisted their bodies, but they couldn't do anything. Chu Mu sized up the 4 ominous demons. The horns on their foreheads were black, indicating that they were the lowest level of ominous demons. The ominous demons of the mystic realm were divided into iron-horned ominous demons, copper-horned ominous demons, and silver-horned ominous demons. Above them were the golden-horned ominous demons. The strength of an iron-horned ominous demon was about the level of a 7-star saint, and so on. A copper-horned ominous demon was equivalent to an 8-star saint, a silver-horned ominous demon was equivalent to a 9-star saint, and a golden-horned ominous demon was equivalent to a legend. However, the ferocious demons were even more powerful than regular human sword saints. This was because the ferocious demons had a special characteristic, which was that they possessed extremely terrifying physical strength, great strength, and extraordinary speed. Their scales possessed astonishing defensive abilities, and their self-healing abilities were shocking as well. Ordinary injuries could be healed in an extremely short amount of time. Lastly, the ominous demons of the mystic realm were very tenacious. They were very difficult to kill. One had to break their core to truly kill them. However, the core of the ominous demons was not fixed in one place. It could move around and was difficult to control. The power of spiritual energy covered the 4 ominous demons and carefully observed them. Although Chu Mu had some understanding before entering, what he heard was not as real as what he saw with his own eyes. Chu Mu's god's soul power covered the 4 iron-horn fierce demons and seeped into their bodies to sense carefully. At this moment, the 4 iron-horn fierce demons suddenly gave up struggling. The third eye between their eyebrows suddenly lit up and shot out beams of black iron light. They were as sharp as swords and as fast as lightning, piercing through the void. Chu Mu's footsteps shifted, as if he had already been prepared. He calmly dodged the 4 black iron beams. With a thought, a thread-like sword aura broke through the tough scales of the fierce demons and cut into their bodies. The pain caused the 4 fierce demons to instantly roar out. In an instant, the 4 ominous demons were cut into dozens of pieces by Chu Mu's sword chi and fell to the ground. No blood flowed out. Each piece of flesh was trembling, slowly approaching each other and piecing themselves together. What an amazing vitality! Chu Mu couldn't help but be stunned. According to the current situation, these 4 ominous demons that had been cut into dozens of pieces would be able to be pieced back together and resurrected in less than a quarter of an hour. However, Chu Mu didn't give them the chance. Under the sword chi, he directly pierced through their exposed cores. Suddenly, an invisible force spread out from their cores. Chapter 1794. Smoke rose from all directions. If the purgatory was such a harsh place, ordinary people would not be able to survive in it. A group of ominous demons from the mystic realm surged over from all directions. Frighteningly ferocious roars came from their mouths as their sharp claws tore through the air. The third eye between their eyebrows shot out beams of bronze or black iron light that were as sharp as swords, piercing through the void. Ferocious, ruthless, tyrannical, and terrifying. Claw shadows filled the sky, sharp and unparalleled. Faced with this, Lin Ziki's expression abruptly changed and he subconsciously took a step back. When the person beside him saw Lin Ziki's action, he frowned slightly and immediately scolded, we sword cultivators have no fear in our hearts. Our swords can cut through anything. How can you retreat?" "Father, I was wrong." Lin Ziki hurriedly admitted his mistake and took a step forward. His face was filled with determination as he looked straight at the group of ominous beasts. Lin Ziki was a genius. The reason why he took a step back was because it was his first time entering the dark god mystic realm. The ominous beasts of the mystic realm were incomparably ferocious and ferocious. In addition, there were many ominous beasts charging at him. Their attacks were shocking enough to tear Lin Ziki apart. A tyrannical aura was released from Lin Jintong's body, instantly covering the surrounding ominous beasts. The aura was so strong that it caused the void to tremble as if it was frozen. More than a dozen ominous beasts of the mystic realm stopped in their track. An indescribable sword light streaked across the sky like an evil dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It was arrogant and domineering. With a loud roar, it destroyed all the ominous beasts of the ominous beast. Beams of light hit it, but they all dissipated, unable to damage it at all. When the evil dragon appeared, all the ominous beasts of the mystic realm were torn apart wherever it passed. Whether it was the iron horn ominous beasts or the copper horn ominous beasts, none of them were spared. There was no need to waste divine soul power to find the core of the ominous beast. With one sword strike, it destroyed the core with absolute power. The core of the ominous beasts was the hardest part of their bodies. It was difficult to destroy it. However, under the evil dragon's sword strike, more than a dozen ominous beasts of the ominous beasts of the ominous beasts were shattered. Cheer, why aren't you absorbing it? Lin Zhentong. Yes. Lin Ziqi's eyes burned with passion. She was shocked by the power of her father's sword. She secretly thought that one day, she would also be able to possess such tyrannical strength. Lin Ziqi circulated his cultivation art and instantly, a suction force appeared. The formless but pure energy of his heart core was drawn in like a bird returning to its nest. It entered Lin Ziqi's body and was absorbed by him. He did not need to spend any effort to refine the pure energy of the core. He only needed to circulate it through his meridians once before it was converted into sword origin and merged with his own sword origin, increasing the amount of sword origin. Lin Ziqi's aura had clearly become stronger after absorbing only a dozen core energies. That's right. This was the reason why one's strength would increase significantly after entering the Black God secret realm. By killing a mystic realm beast and breaking its core, one would be able to absorb the power of the core and convert it into sword essence without any side effects, thus increasing the amount of sword essence one possessed. In other words, as long as one's cultivation base was high enough, one could slaughter the ferocious demons in the Dark God's secret realm to obtain the power of the heart core and increase one's cultivation base. Of course, if one's cultivation base was not high enough, facing the ferocious demons in the Dark God's secret realm would only result in death. Take Lin Ziqi for example. Although his cultivation base had increased over the past 10 years and he had reached the middle level of the 7-star saint level, he was still unable to withstand the attack from the heart core and would have been torn to pieces in an instant. This was also the reason why Lin Zhentong had spent a lot of money to get himself a spot to enter the Black God's secret realm with his only son. To him, the Black God's secret realm had no effect on his cultivation base, because his cultivation base had already reached the pinnacle of the 9-star saint level. The only way to increase his cultivation base was to make a breakthrough. However, above the pinnacle of the 9-star saint level were the peerless experts. It was extremely difficult to make a breakthrough. Since ancient times, countless geniuses had been stuck at the pinnacle of the 9-star saint level and were unable to make a breakthrough. Lin Zhentong's strength was tyrannical, far surpassing the average 9-star saint level expert. He was a super expert of the dark star level. His goal was to help his only son increase his cultivation base in the shortest time possible without any side effects. As his cultivation base increased, his strength would naturally follow. One had to admit that Lin Zhentong cared deeply for Lin Ziqi. The energy of the 4 cores was absorbed into his body and instantly converted into the divine desolate sword essence. Chu Mu could feel the amount of divine desolate sword essence in his body increasing slightly. The divine desolate sword essence was an extremely high-quality energy. Therefore, it required more core energy to be converted. Of course, it was also because the energy of the 4 cores came from the iron horn ominous demon. If it was a higher-level ominous demon, the quality of the core energy would naturally be higher. As expected, my cultivation base will increase significantly here. At that time, my strength. Chu Mu's eyes shone brightly as he looked into the distance. Hope, he saw a hope, a very big hope. After entering the land of exile, it was extremely difficult to obtain the strength of a peerless expert within 30 years. One had to know that when Chu Mu first entered the land of exile, His cultivation base was only at the early fourth heavenly layer of the Aeon. And with the change in his dantian, in addition to the high quality of the divine wilderness sword essence, increasing his cultivation level was several times or even 10 times more difficult than most cultivators. This meant that to increase his cultivation level, the amount of heaven-earth yuan qi he needed to absorb would be several times or even 10 times more than other cultivators. He had set a goal for himself to reach the peak of the 9th heavenly layer of the Aeon within 30 years. Now, he saw hope. The Black God's secret realm would only be open for a short period of a month. In this 1 month, he had to kill as many ominous demons as he could to absorb the energy of the cores. Ha 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 ha, the Black God's secret realm is indeed a good place. An 8-star saint-level genius laughed heartily as he slashed out with his sword. He killed all the ominous demons in the secret realm and absorbed the energy of the cores. Suddenly, a silver-white beam of light shot over from afar. It pierced through the void like an aurora and tore the sky apart. This 8-star saint-rank prodigy had only just realized this, and before he could even react, the silver-white beam of light had already pierced through his head and pierced through his primordial spirit, causing his consciousness to dissipate. His face was still laughing, but his eyes were filled with fear and confusion. Shortly after, a 3-meter-tall demon with a silver-white horn appeared. It stretched out its sharp claws and tore the genius's body apart. It grabbed his yuan shun and swallowed it. When humans entered the Black God's secret realm, they killed the ominous demons in the secret realm to absorb the energy of the cores. Similarly, the ominous demons could also kill humans and consume their yuan shun to increase their strength. It was a mutual process. The key to who killed who depended on strength. Children, follow me. The hunting season that occurs once in 1,000 years has begun. After the silver-horned ominous demon swallowed the yuan shun, its aura fluctuated and it seemed to have become stronger. With a strange roar, more ominous demons appeared and howled. The ominous demons of the Black God's secret realm seemed to have gotten used to the hunting season that occurred once in 1,000 years. It was also the time when a portion of the ominous demon's strength increased. Seize the opportunity, and obtain the opportunity to become stronger. With the sword in his hand, a beam of sword light shot into the sky. The fiery red sword light was sharp, but it was not straight. Instead, it zigzagged and jumped, piercing through the bodies of the ominous demons. There were a total of 5 ominous demons. 1 was a copper-horned ominous demon and 4 were iron-horned ominous demons. All of them had their cores pierced through and died under the sword. The divine desolate sword art was activated. Under the suction force, the pure energy of the 5 cores was absorbed and refined into sword energy. On the 5th day of entering the Black God's secret realm, Chu Mu had also found a better way to kill the ominous demons. Therefore, the sword light zigzagged and pierced through the ominous demons. Even though the ominous demons of the Black God's secret realm had a strong physique and shocking defensive power, Chu Mu's sword light could still easily pierce through them, absorbing the energy of the cores. Suddenly, the divine desolate sword essence in his dantian trembled slightly and an even stronger aura spread out. His cultivation base had broken through. It had only taken him 5 days to reach the mid-stage of the 7th sky of Wangu from the early stage of the 7th sky of Wangu. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken Chu Mu at least 5 to 6 years to make such a small breakthrough. Naturally, his strength would also increase as his cultivation base increased. With this speed, I should be able to break through to the early stage of the 8th sky of Wangu in a month's time. Chu Mu thought to himself. Now that he couldn't use his sword essence, his strength would drop by a level. However, the increase in his cultivation base would more or less make up for the drop in his strength. If he had the cultivation base of the early stage of the 8th sky of Wangu, even if he couldn't use his sword essence, Chu Mu was confident that he could easily kill an ordinary 9-star saint. He might even be able to rival a dark star sword saint. However, He couldn't be sure as he hadn't reached that level yet. However, in 5 days, his cultivation base had increased by a small level. Chu Mu's heart was filled with fighting spirit and motivation. Battles and killings were taking place everywhere. Humans killed demons, and demons killed demons. The Black God's secret realm was the ominous demons' territory and world. Here, the ominous demons had an obvious geographical advantage, and were in large numbers. Humans had both disadvantages and advantages. The humans who entered the secret realm were all geniuses. True geniuses had the strength to fight across realms. Therefore, no matter how many iron horn ominous demons there were, they couldn't do anything to them. Only those who had reached the level of the copper horn ominous demons could pose a threat to them. However, in any case, they had encountered great opportunities while walking the line between life and death. Chapter 1795. The silver light beam broke apart, like an aurora from the heavens. With a sharp sound, it pierced through the void. Wherever it passed, layers of ripples spread out in all directions. A total of 3 silver light beams shot out from different angles. Their speed was unbelievably fast. Chu Mu's feet shifted, his body swaying, twisting and turning in unimaginable ways, avoiding the 3 silver light beams. His sword pierced out, piercing through the void. In the clouds, the sword light condensed, silent, unstoppable. Cloud-piercing. With a poochie sound, the incomparably sharp sword light instantly pierced through the chest of a silver-horned fierce demon. It was exactly where the core was moving. What a shocking defense! Chu Mu thought. Luckily, he had already used 80% of his strength, otherwise, it would have been difficult to break through. A pure and dense invisible core power suddenly diffused out, and was rapidly absorbed by Chu Mu. In his meridians, it was like a long river surging endlessly, pouring into his dantian and transforming into divine wilderness sword essence. The sharp claws broke apart, the cold silver light tore through, and in the midst of the sound, there was a frightening killing intent. It was fierce and overbearing. Humans die. The obscure, ear-piercing, and strange words were as sharp as swords. Attacking from the left and right, the 4 sharp claws transformed into countless, layer upon layer, sealing off the heavens and earth, cutting off all of Chu Mu's escape route. The fierce demons had intelligence, their bodies were strong, their speed was fast, their defensive power was astonishing, and they also had a terrifying self-healing ability and an incomparably tenacious life force. The light beams they shot out were shockingly powerful, and their claws were incomparably sharp, comparable to the sharpness of the heavenly saint's sword. For such a creature, in terms of life force, it was unknown how much higher it was than a human. In a one-on-one battle of the same level, a human was not a match for a fierce demon. To defeat and kill a fierce demon, one had to be stronger than them. In addition, compared to the ominous demons, the human race had an advantage in one aspect, and that was their sword technique. They possessed all sorts of profound and powerful sword techniques, while the fighting style of the ominous demons was very direct, without much skill to speak of. However, after thousands of years of human sword sages entering, the intelligent fierce beasts gradually improved their skills. The iron-horned fierce beast's skills didn't improve significantly, but the silver-horned fierce beast's fighting skills were many times stronger than before. The sharp claws of the 2 silver-horned fierce demons covered the surrounding area and sealed off the void. Their skills had reached a very high level. If it were other 9-star martial saints at the middle or high level, they would most likely die under such attack. However, Chu Mu's skills were better and his strength was more powerful. Turning the impossible into the possible, his body seemed to have turned into a wisp of smoke, shuttling back and forth between the overlapping claw shadows. The 2 silver-horned fierce demons widened their eyes in shock. It was hard to imagine that a human, whose aura was only at the level of an iron-horned fierce demon, could not only kill a silver-horned fierce demon with one sword move, but also dodge under the siege of 2 silver-horned fierce demons. This kind of claw technique was a kind of brilliant technique created by the fierce demon clan after countless experiments. Once it was used, it directly sealed off the surrounding space, making it impossible for people to dodge and could only take it head-on. Strength and speed were the strong points of the fierce demon clan. Coupled with the terrifying sharp claws, in a head-on collision, only a human would die. Unexpectedly, this human was so cunning that he didn't take them head-on at all. He shuttled back and forth between the claw shadows, his divine soul power locked on one of the silver-horned fierce demons and felt the location of its core. The core was moving at an amazing speed without any pattern. The more powerful a fierce demon was, the more obscure its core was and the harder it was to feel. A ray of sword light condensed, as if it was a sword that could cut through the stars, sweeping out. In the midst of the slashing sound, the silver-horned fierce demon's tough scales couldn't withstand the sword light. This kind of sword move could cut through everything, whether it was hard or soft, whether it was real or not, everything would be cut down. The sword cut off the silver-horned fierce demon's thigh. Just as the core was moving, Chu Mu's sword cut through it and shattered it. Although the remaining silver-horned fierce demon was powerful enough to kill a normal 9-star Saint rank middle stage expert and fight against a 9-star Saint rank high stage expert, it was still no match for Chu Mu. The energy of the core was absorbed, rushing through his meridians like 100 rivers flowing into a stream, pouring into his dantian. A rumbling sound resounded, and the divine wilderness sword essence lake in Chu Mu's dantian was surging with waves, constantly expanding, filling, and rising. Late 7th sky of the Wangu realm. This was the level of a 7-star saint expert. Chu Mu's strength had increased yet again. Today was the 10th day since he entered the Black God secret realm. At this rate, when the Black God secret realm closes, my cultivation will definitely reach the 8th heavenly layer, or even the 8th heavenly layer. Chu Mu thought to himself. All of a sudden, Chu Mu's body trembled uncontrollably as a chill invaded his body. He didn't have time to think, and he instinctively executed the sword chi shadow. Almost at the same time, the sword chi shadow was torn apart by a ray of black sword chi. Chu Mu's expression was cold, and he turned around to look. Two figures were rapidly approaching him. Lin Zhentong, Lin Ziki. Father, kill him! Lin Ziki shouted. Lin Zhentong took a step forward, crossing dozens of feet. With every step he took, his body flickered, and the distance between him and Chu Mu narrowed. That ray of black sword chi was Lin Zhentong's. His goal was to kill Chu Mu without him noticing. Therefore, it was extremely secretive, and he didn't expect that Chu Mu would still be able to detect it. In the blink of an eye, Lin Zhentong was already close to Chu Mu. Without saying a word, he directly attacked with his sword. Lin Zhentong was the second palace master of the Evil Dragon Palace. He was known as the Evil Dragon Sword, and the sword he used was a low-grade spiritual sword he had cultivated himself, the Evil Dragon Sword. The body of the sword was pitch black, and there was a red pattern on it. It looked like an evil dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. With a thrust of the sword, the red evil dragon on the sword seemed to have come alive. It instantly crossed dozens of meters and appeared in front of Chu Mu. Pointing down, it seemed to have transformed into an evil dragon claw that ripped apart the sky and everything in its path. Evil Dragon Sword Art, Evil Dragon Claws. The Evil Dragon Sword Art was an ordinary inheritance-level sword art of the Evil Dragon Palace. As the second palace master, Lin Zhentong had immersed himself in the Evil Dragon Sword Art for hundreds of years. He had long since completely grasped the essence of this sword art. He had even modified it to become a sword art that was more compatible with him, allowing him to better display his strength. Lin Ziki had naturally trained in the Evil Dragon Sword technique before, or rather, the Evil Dragon Sword technique was currently Lin Ziki's main sword technique. He had some talent in the way of the sword, and thus, in less than 10 years, he had already grasped more than half of the essence of the Evil Dragon Sword technique. often, when he struck out with his sword, it would be accompanied by the image of an evil dragon. But now, seeing Lin Jintong use the first move of the evil dragon sword art, evil dragon claws, it didn't have much momentum, and could even be considered weak. However, there was a heart-palpitating power brewing within it. Lin Ziki felt as if an evil dragon had really appeared in front of him. It was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it descended from the sky. As it stretched out its claws, the space beneath its claws shattered, and everything turned to dust. Kill him! Lin Ziki was roused. He was extremely excited. Back then, after he had sent Ying Wei and the others to kill Chu Mu, he had been feeling uneasy. After that, there had been news of Chu Mu and Bai Chen's battle, where they were evenly matched, and he had obtained the 7th star, the unparalleled sword star. Chu Mu had already become a shadow in his heart, a heart demon. Lin Ziki had always hoped that Chu Mu would die. Only then would he be able to breathe a sigh of relief. As for himself, although his cultivation had increased by quite a bit, and his strength had also increased by quite a bit, compared to Chu Mu, there was still a large gap. He had no confidence in killing Chu Mu. Now that Lin Jintong was here, he could definitely kill Chu Mu with a single strike. It was as if an evil dragon had descended from the sky. It stretched out its claws, and the terrifying pressure caused the surrounding space to constrict. The terrifying pressure continued to press down on Chu Mu from all directions, as if it was going to crush his bones. This is the strength of a Dark Star Sword Saint? Chu Mu was shocked. Ever since he had heard of the Dark Star, Bright Moon, and Bright Sun ranks, he had been very curious. Today, he had finally experienced it personally. Among the Dark Star experts, Lin Jintong was one of the top. That was why his sword was able to exert such great pressure on Chu Mu. His blood and chi surged, and his muscles trembled. The eternal spiritual sword appeared in his left hand. He crossed the two swords and slashed out, using the Dao cutter sword style. The tyrannical power broke apart the invisible pressure. His body turned into a wisp of smoke, and he instantly escaped. At the same time, under the evil dragon's claws, the space in that area seemed to have collapsed. There was a faint but terrifying whistling sound, and the hard ground below directly crumbled, turning into dust. Chu Mu had dodged his sword. Lin Jintong's eyes flashed with surprise. A late-stage 7th sky of Wangu genius was actually able to escape from his sword technique. It was really rare. Lin Jintong's sword didn't slow down at all, and he executed the next move. In that instant, Chu Mu's hair stood on end. Even his soul was trembling. An indescribable roar that seemed to be able to shatter the heavens and earth condensed into a terrifying sound wave. It turned from formless to tangible, and layers of resistance rushed out. Evil Dragon's sword technique, Evil Dragon's roar. The evil dragon on the evil dragon's sword seemed to have come back to life. It opened its mouth, and a terrifying sound wave rushed out. A vacuum was created in front of Lin Jintong. Under the vacuum, layers of ripples could be seen. Everywhere it passed, everything was shattered. His hair stood on end. Chu Mu's pupils contracted rapidly. A cold light shot out, reflecting the layers of sound waves and the terrifying evil dragon. That kind of pressure poured down, almost causing his body to collapse. An intense sense of danger exploded in his body. It was as if a storm was brewing in his spiritual world. Tyrannical, that sword was really too tyrannical. That kind of power was incomparably terrifying. It was simply impossible to resist. Chapter 1796. The evil dragon's roar could destroy the heavens and the earth. This kind of attack was different from ordinary attack. It was a type of attack that leaned towards sound wave. It was the combination of the power of darkness and sound to erode and destroy. Without any hesitation, Chu Mu kept his sword and held the eternal spiritual sword with both hands. A tyrannical aura soared into the sky, and a shocking pressure fell from the sky. All of his strength was poured into the eternal spiritual sword. Even without the support of the eternal sword intent, The power of this sword was many times stronger than when he fought with Bai Chen. This was thanks to Chu Mu's perfection and the increase in his cultivation. Heaven's Might Sword Style. Among all the sword skills that Chu Mu had mastered, this was the most tyrannical sword style. The combination of the sword intent, slash intent, and shock intent was much more perfect than before. Heaven's Might Sword Style. Heaven's might descends and sword light fell. In an instant, the evil dragon's roar was destroyed. The evil dragon's roar was destroyed, and the energy spread out in all directions. Layers of the ground were lifted, shattered, and turned into dust. The shocking remaining power was still heading towards Lin Jintong. Lin Jintong couldn't help but be moved. A single sword strike from a 7-star high stage saint rank was actually able to defeat his evil dragon sword technique and even had the power to counterattack. This was truly too shocking. It also strengthened his resolve to kill Chu Mu. If his intention to kill Chu Mu was for his only son, Lin Ziki, then his killing intent now was his true killing intent. He couldn't let Chu Mu grow. Otherwise, he would be a huge threat in the future. Chu Mu knew that he couldn't compete with an expert like Lin Jintong. Therefore, after the Heaven's Might Sword Style, he immediately used all his strength to retreat. In the blink of an eye, he was already a few hundred meters away. Die! Lin Jintong attacked again. His body seemed to have merged with the evil dragon sword in his hand. A loud roar sounded, and the evil dragon on the sword lit up. The sword turned into an evil dragon, and Lin Jintong's body merged with it. Man and sword as one, evil dragon descends. This move was called the Great Evil Dragon Sword's Descent of the Evil Dragon. The Great Evil Dragon Sword was the secret sword of the Evil Dragon Palace. Its quality was close to the peak of inherited level sword techniques, second only to the Silver Sword technique. Its power was incomparably strong. In the Evil Dragon Hall, other than the first Hall Master, second Hall Master, and third Hall Master, only a few powerful elders could cultivate the Great Evil Dragon Sword. Even Lin Jintong's only son, Lin Ziki, didn't have the qualifications to cultivate the Great Evil Dragon Sword. The Great Evil Dragon Sword was the secret inheritance of the Evil Dragon Hall. As the second Palace Master, Lin Jintong had come into contact with it several decades ago and started cultivating it. Now, he had grasped its essence and could bring out its full might. This sword was called the Descent of the Evil Dragon, and it was the first sword of the Great Evil Dragon Sword. It was as if he had transformed into a true evil dragon that had descended upon the world. That kind of might was earth-shattering, and the pressure it brought to Chu Mu was unimaginable. He seemed to hear his bones groaning, and his qi and blood were trembling uncontrollably. The full power of a Dark Star Sword Saint and the terror of the Great Evil Dragon Sword's first move were completely unleashed at this moment. I can't block it. Chu Mu instantly understood, and further realized the terror of a Dark Star Sword Saint. Perhaps if he could use his sword intent, he might be able to block it a little. But at this moment, if he used his sword intent, the trace of extreme destructive aura that had yet to be erased would definitely destroy his ordinary sword intent. Retreat. After making up his mind, Chu Mu immediately activated the power of the Descent of the Sword God. His sharpness increased tenfold, and he entered the realm of emptiness. His judgment of the descent of the evil dragon became 10 times clearer. Attack. Falling Stars Sword Style. Countless sword light turned into meteors that fell to the ground and shot out. Then, Chu Mu took out the Blaze Spirit Sword again. He crossed his 2 swords and used the Dao Beheading Sword Style. Finally, he used the Cloud Piercing Sword Style. Using attack against attack, he didn't show any weakness. In terms of sword skills, Chu Mu's self-created and perfected sword style wasn't inferior to his opponent's. The only difference was the absolute difference in power. The same move, with different levels of power, would bring about different ultimate power. When the three sword styles collided with the descent of the evil dragon, they could only block it a little and weaken its power. After all, the difference in power between Chu Mu and Lin Jintong was very obvious. Lin Jintong had stepped into the Dark Star realm for more than 100 years. He was one of the top Dark Star experts, and he was infinitely close to a bright moon sword saint. The great evil dragon sword he used with his full power was naturally very powerful. With a roar, Chu Mu couldn't avoid the attack of the descent of the evil dragon. The head of the evil dragon was Lin Jintong's sword. Chu Mu could see that this sword was similar to the evil dragon claws of the evil dragon sword technique, but it was many times stronger. The six paths sword style was used, and layers of black vortexes appeared. They condensed into a line and absorbed the attack. The black vortexes shattered under the impact of the descent of the evil dragon. This was the absolute difference in power. In the end, the descent of the evil dragon directly hit Chu Mu's crossed swords. The terrifying power exploded, and the impact made Chu Mu's chest feel stuffy. It was as if he was hit by a giant hammer, and his chest almost caved in. Blood surged, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Chu Mu took advantage of this moment and used the power of the attack to use the sword Chi Shadow. He left behind an afterimage, and his real body instantly retreated 1,000 meters. At the same time, he slashed out with both swords and used the Sky Scar sword style to attack Lin Ziki. Although Lin Ziki's cultivation had increased, she couldn't block Chu Mu's two Sky Scar sword styles. She was shocked. "Father, save me!" Lin Ziki screamed. Lin Jintong, who was chasing after Chu Mu to kill him, had no choice but to turn around and slash out with his sword. The two Sky Scar sword styles were shattered, and Chu Mu was already 1,000 meters away. This wasn't the land of exile, but the Black God's secret realm. They could encounter a secret realm fierce demon at any time. If Lin Jintong chased after Chu Mu, he would be able to kill Chu Mu at least 10,000 meters away. If a powerful secret realm fierce demon suddenly appeared, Lin Ziki would probably be killed. Lin Jintong thought for a moment, and decided not to chase after Chu Mu immediately. Instead, he took Lin Ziki and chased after Chu Mu. She had to protect her stomach, while also killing a monster like Chu Mu under her sword. This was to prevent Chu Mu from becoming a threat to her in the future. She could only do this. However, with Lin Ziki in tow, her speed was undoubtedly much lower. Chu Mu knew that he was no match for Lin Jintong, so he left at full speed. He was injured by the sword. Fortunately, his self-healing ability was strong, and he had a shocking amount of vitality. As he left at full speed, his injuries healed quickly. Not long after, Lin Jintong and Lin Ziki were left far behind by Chu Mu. However, Chu Mu still felt an indistinct sense of danger. It was as if there was a sliver of killing intent coiling around his body, letting Chu Mu know that Lin Jintong hadn't given up, and was instead chasing after him. "If I'm at the peak of the seventh sky of the Wangu realm, I'll be able to fight against Lin Jintong. If I'm at the 8th sky of the Wangu realm, killing Lin Jintong will be a piece of cake." Chu Mu thought to himself. He had entered the Black God's secret realm to raise his cultivation. However, at this moment, he was being chased by a terrifying expert. He could be killed at any time. A sense of danger surrounded him. Chu Mu did not dare to relax. If he could use his sword intent, he would be able to fight against Lin Jintong. However, since he had decided to cultivate a new and stronger sword intent, he could not give up halfway. Of course, if he had no other choice, he would still use the eternal sword intent. However, he would try not to use it if he could. As he ran at full speed, the distance between him and Lin Jintong and Lin Ziki increased. Surprisingly, Chu Mu did not encounter any demons in the secret realm. Otherwise, his speed would be slowed down, which was not a good thing for him. "What's that?" After running for an unknown distance, Chu Mu saw a towering building in front of him. It was a pyramid-like building that stood on the ground. It was at least tens of thousands of square meters, and it was 300 meters tall. It was dark green, and it was made of an unknown material. Demon nest. Chumu was shocked, but he was also delighted. Demon nests were the lairs of the secret realm fierce demons. There were at least thousands of them in one demon nest. It was said that there was a demon nest leader in each demon nest. The strength of the demon nest leader was obviously stronger than that of the silver horn fierce demon. An ordinary 9-star saint was no match for the demon nest leader. I wonder how many stripes the demon nest leader has? Chumu thought to himself, suppressing the excitement in his heart. To the humans who entered, every demon nest was an opportunity, but it was also a kind of danger. There were at least 1,000 ferocious demons in the demon lair. Once they attacked together, their power would be terrifying. Even an ordinary 9-star saint at the pinnacle would be killed. Moreover, there was a mystic realm ferocious demon with an unknown number of veins holding the fort. The demon lair master was the most terrifying existence. Take the human clan sword cultivators in the land of exile for example. Between the peak of the 9-star saint level and the peerless experts, there was still a difference in strength. According to the level of their battle strength, they were divided into 3 levels: dark star level, bright moon level, and bright sun level. Among the fierce demons, the silver horn fierce demon and the golden horn fierce demon were also divided into 3 levels: 1-striped fierce demon, 2-striped fierce demon, and 3-striped fierce demon. A 1-striped fierce demon had a single golden stripe on its silver horn, and so on. A 2-striped fierce demon had 2 golden stripes, and a 3-striped fierce demon had 3 golden stripes. A 1-striped fierce demon was equivalent to a dark star sword saint, but it was more ferocious. A 2-striped fierce demon was equivalent to a bright moon sword saint, and a 3-striped fierce demon was equivalent to a bright sun sword saint. Chapter 1797. Enter? Or not enter? Chumu hesitated for a moment before he made up his mind. Enter. Even if he encountered the lord of the demon nest, he was confident that he could escape. If he was lucky, he might even be able to increase his cultivation base to the peak of the 7th sky of Wangu. At that time, his strength would definitely increase. After a moment of hesitation, Chumu did not slow down. He maintained his full speed and quickly approached the demon nest. Then, he rushed into the demon nest. The demon nest was divided into 4 levels. Each level was dozens of meters high. The first level was the widest and belonged to the iron horn fierce demons. There was a strict hierarchy among the fierce demons in the secret territory. The second level was where the copper horn fierce demons lived. The third level was where the silver horn fierce demons lived. As for the 4th level, it was where the lord of the demon nest lived. As soon as Chumu entered the demon nest, he felt that it was different from the outside. The cold and domineering aura in the demon nest was more obvious. This aura was very suitable for fierce demons. The thicker the aura, the more beneficial it was for fierce demons. The demon nest itself had the ability to gather the aura from all directions. Therefore, the more aura a fierce demon could absorb in the demon nest. The higher the level, the stronger the aura. Someone has been here? As soon as Chumu entered the demon nest, he saw corpses everywhere. They were all iron horn fierce demons' corpses. They were densely packed together and scattered on the ground. There were at least 1,000 of them. The corpses of these iron horn fierce demons still had weak sword chi ripples. In other words, someone had entered the demon nest earlier than him. Based on the situation, it was very likely that someone had entered the demon nest's 2nd or 3rd level. Chumu's soul power swept through and the first layer of iron horn fierce demon's heart core was shattered. The power of the heart core was also absorbed. Absorbing the core energy of thousands of iron-horned beasts was enough to raise the cultivation of a 7th sky of Aeon cultivator. However, for an 8th sky of Aeon cultivator, the increase wasn't as significant. After all, there was a difference between their levels. With quick steps, Chumu rushed to the 2nd level. Somewhere in the second level, an intense battle was going on. Hundreds of bronze-horned vicious demons formed an encirclement. In the center, there was a figure waving his sword. Bronze light beams shot out, and his sharp claws locked down the area. A beam of sword light shuttled back and forth among the copper-horned fierce demons. The sword light was like a bolt of lightning, containing all the power within. It didn't seem very powerful, but in fact, all the power burst out the moment it came into contact with the target. Dodging, counterattacking, shattering the bronze light beam, and killing the copper-horned fierce demons. The person who was surrounded was a powerful sword saint. He was much more powerful than an ordinary 9-star saint. Therefore, when facing the encirclement and attacks of several hundred copper-horned fierce demons, although it was a little dangerous, he could still rely on his powerful strength to contend with them. One of the advantages of fighting against fierce demons was that no matter how difficult it was, as long as one could hold on and kill the fierce demons one by one could absorb the power of the fierce demon's core to replenish one's own consumption and maintain enough fighting strength. Under such circumstances, one could also improve one's cultivation little by little. Therefore, the human clan sword sage, who was surrounded by hundreds of bronze-horned fierce demons, would be able to kill all of them as long as he persisted. This is... Chu Mu's eyes narrowed. From the sword light, he felt a familiar fluctuation. It's not just me who has become stronger. However, I didn't die at that time. Now, it's time to pay with my life, Chu Mu secretly said. His eyes stared and his aura was restrained. There were several hundred copper-horned fierce demons on the second level. At this time, all of them were participating in the encirclement. Chu Mu deliberately restrained his aura, so he wasn't discovered. With a thought, Chu Mu stretched out his hand and the blazing brilliant spirit sword appeared. His spirit power spread out and covered a part of the copper-horned fierce demons, directly finding the location of their core. Sword out. Falling stars sword style. Streaks of sharp sword light descended upon the world like a meteor shower, carrying with them the power to destroy the world. It was too sudden. The copper-horned demons were completely unprepared, and a dozen of them were pierced through. Their core cores were shattered and the power of the core cores spread out. Under the circulation of the divine desolate sword art, the power of the dozen core cores was quickly absorbed. Sir, please use your full strength. Let's join hands and slaughter this group of fierce demons. The person surrounded by the copper-horned fierce demons immediately felt the sword chi fluctuation coming from outside and was overjoyed. He was Sword Monarch Fengwui. With one man and one sword, he killed his way into the demon nest. On the first level, he easily slaughtered thousands of iron-horned fierce demons and absorbed their core. However, the increase in his cultivation wasn't particularly obvious. When he killed his way into the second level, he was surrounded by several hundred copper-horned fierce demons and immediately fell into danger. That's right, his strength was indeed better than an ordinary peak 9-star saint. In a one-on-one situation, he could kill a copper-horned fierce demon with one sword without giving it any chance to fight back. However, in the case of several hundred copper-horned fierce demons, it became difficult. In particular, the copper-horned fierce demons could shoot out bronze light beams. The power of those light beams was astonishing. Once one was hit, one would definitely be injured. If one was hit by 3 of them, one would definitely be seriously injured. Therefore, in the face of several hundred copper-horned fierce demons surrounding him, he constantly dodged, blocked, and counterattacked. He was looking for an opportunity to strike with his sword and kill one, absorbing the power of the core to replenish his sword energy. If this continued, he might be able to kill several hundred copper-horned fierce demons, but at least 90% of the core power he absorbed would be used to recover his sword energy. It wouldn't be able to increase his cultivation. As such, there was no way for him to kill his way into the third level and kill those silver-horned fierce demons. Just as he was hesitating whether or not he should fight his way out of the encirclement and find other vicious demons outside the demon nest to kill to recover his sword origin and increase his strength before coming back, Chu Mu's appearance gave him hope. Having his core power divided by others was better than not being able to increase his sword energy. Chu Mu didn't respond, but he struck with his sword again to kill the copper-horned fierce demons and absorb their core power. The core power of the iron-horned fierce demons was no longer of much use to him. At the very least, he needed the core power of the copper-horned fierce demons for it to be effective. One after another, he killed them and continued to absorb them. The divine wilderness sword energy grew again. Every time Chu Mu attacked, it was a perfect combination of strength as one. Therefore, he didn't consume much sword energy. A portion of the core power was used to recover his sword energy, while the majority of it was converted into sword energy to increase his cultivation. A portion of the copper-horned fierce demons turned around and faced Chu Mu, surrounding him. Chu Mu immediately used his movement technique and rapidly moved. Like a wisp of smoke, he rapidly shuttled back and forth, preventing the copper-horned fierce demons from truly surrounding him. Chu Mu's addition greatly alleviated the pressure on Feng Wui. Feng Wui erupted. Beams of sword light seemed to contain thunder as they tore through the sky. Under the dazzling beams of light, they pierced through the heads of the copper-horned fierce demons. The energy contained within exploded, causing the heads to explode. Although the copper-horned fierce demons had strong vitality and amazing self-recovery ability, they still needed a considerable amount of time to recover after their heads were destroyed. Before they recovered, they didn't have much combat power and couldn't pose a threat to Feng Wui. Chu Mu's cultivation had reached the late stage of the seventh sky of the Wangu realm. His strength had obviously surpassed the peak of the 9-star Saint realm. He was close to the Dark Star realm. Moreover, he was moving around freely, so it wasn't difficult for him to deal with a group of copper-horned fierce demons. Kill. Kill. The number of copper-horned fierce demons decreased. It's you. Feng Wui also saw that it was Chu Mu. He was shocked. After his sword shattered the head of a copper-horned fierce demon in front of him, his body was instantly surrounded by countless lightning arcs. His body merged with his sword light, turning into a sword light. He quickly circled around the copper-horned fierce demon, drawing a shocking arc as he attacked Chu Mu from the side. Once he attacked, he used the Thunder Hibernation Sword Art's ultimate move. Feng Wui's cultivation had reached the mid-stage of the 8th sky of the Wangu realm. He was stronger than when he had just entered the Black God's secret realm. He was confident that he wasn't inferior to Chu Mu. He might even be stronger than him. Previously, he had wanted to kill Chu Mu with his sword. Now, there was no reason for him to let Chu Mu go. As for a reason, was there a need for it? The Thunder Hibernation Sword Light instantly struck Chu Mu's body and shattered it. It was a remnant of sword chi. At the same time, 3 bronze light beams shot towards Feng Wui. The terrifying aura caused Feng Wui's expression to change. He immediately waved his sword and condensed his sword intent, shattering the 3 bronze light beams. The rebound made his body tremble. A terrifying aura appeared in the sky as if the heavens were angry. A terrifying aura pressed down, causing Feng Wui's expression to change drastically. Feng Wui's timing was impeccable. It was the moment when he had used the Thunder Hibernation Sword Art's ultimate move and shattered the 3 bronze sword light. The tyrannical aura caused Feng Wui to tremble. It was as if the heavens had descended. Feng Wui used all his strength to reverse the sword origin. Blood spurted out from his mouth as he quickly moved to the side in an attempt to dodge the attack. In the sky, an indescribably stunning sword light slashed down like the wrath of the heavens. Feng Wui used his sword origin to dodge the attack, damaging his meridians. Just as he was about to escape, the Heavenly Might sword light made a turn in the sky and continued to slash at him. Unable to dodge, Feng Wui could only raise his sword to block the attack. An ear-piercing sound rang out as Feng Wui's sword was cut in half. "Don't kill me!" Feng Wui shouted in shock. The sword light didn't hesitate at all. It was merciless. Kill. A hidden genius, a genius who was more outstanding than the number one genius, a genius who had the potential to become a bright moon elite, had died under Chu Mu's sword. This, from the moment he mercilessly slashed at Chu Mu, the outcome had been decided. After killing Feng Wui with the heavenly might sword style, Chu Mu's figure descended. The surrounding bronze-horned beasts had just arrived. Opening his left hand, the Eternal Spirit sword appeared in his hand, and the two swords attacked. Chapter 1798. The heaven's might was extremely powerful and it killed Feng Wui. The hidden genius Feng Wui no longer existed. With two swords in his hands, Chu Mu used his movement technique. He first took Feng Wui's spatial ring and started a massacre without using any secret technique. With his late seventh sky of Wangu cultivation, his strength was several times stronger than an ordinary peak 9-star saint. Although the copper horn demon was stronger than an ordinary 8-star saint, the gap between him and Chu Mu was still too big. Kill, 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 kill. Under the cover of his divine sense, the movements of the copper horn demon's core were all sensed by Chu Mu. He attacked with his sword and destroyed the core, absorbing its power. The divine desolate sword energy was increasing bit by bit at a perceptible speed. Suddenly, a silver beam of light shot through the sky, tearing through the sky and shooting towards Chu Mu. A strong sense of danger caused him to be greatly alarmed. The appearance of the silver light beam meant that the silver horn demon had appeared. Moreover, there were more than 10 of them. Although Chu Mu's strength was not weak, he still felt a great threat when facing more than 10 silver light beams at the same time. The sword chi shadow shattered and the real body appeared in another place to kill the copper horn demon. At this moment, a strong sense of danger suddenly emerged from the depths of Chu Mu's soul, making him tremble in fear. This sense of danger had exceeded the normal sense of danger and was enough to threaten his life. Without any hesitation, Chu Mu broke through the encirclement. Using the heart to control the sword, he fully displayed the state of sword in the heart. His body and sword became one, turning into a sword light. Under the emergence of the mist, the movements of the copper-horned demon suddenly became sluggish. Silently, a beam of sword light tore through the air. It seemed to be straight, but in fact, it was constantly turning and dodging in an instant. With an astonishing speed, it flew towards the exit of the first floor. Beams of silver light chased after it, almost hitting the sword light that Chu Mu had turned into. It was a close shave as it rushed into the first floor. The beams of silver light hit the walls one after another, shattering and dispersing. The walls of the demon nest were incomparably sturdy, and they were able to withstand the impact of the silver beam. The instant Chu Mu rushed out of the second level and entered the first level, a beam of light shot down from the top and instantly appeared in the second level. At the instant this figure appeared, the few tens of silver horn ferocious demons stopped in unison and lowered their heads submissively as if they were respectfully welcoming the arrival of their king. This figure was a ferocious demon that was 5 meters tall. Its body was covered in faint silver-white scales, and the horn on its forehead was surrounded by a golden pattern. A one-striped dire demon. This was a powerful ominous demon equivalent to a dark star sword saint of the human race. Its strength was much stronger than a dark star sword saint. After the one-stripe ominous demon appeared, its sharp and ferocious gaze swept across the area. In the end, its gaze landed on Feng Wu Yi's battered body, and an indescribably strange smile appeared on its face. Immediately after, the one-stripe ominous demon waved its arms. Beams of mysterious light jumped around and shot towards the copper horn ferocious demon's corpse. The copper horn ferocious demon's corpse melted and condensed into beams of bronze light that shot into the one-stripe ominous demon's body and entered it. Immediately after, the light on the one-stripe ominous demon's body grew from nothing and became more intense. In the end, it was as blazing as the sun. A strange sound came from the one-stripe ominous demon's mouth. It was like a mysterious incantation, a mysterious chant that contained an unknown mysterious power. Immediately after, a beam of light shone from the one-stripe ominous demon's horn. The gold and silver lights intertwined and turned into a beam of mixed light that shot towards Feng Wuyi's battered body. Feng Wuyi's body started to tremble violently when the light entered his body. His broken body was gradually covered by the gold and silver light. Not long after, the silver-horned fierce demon's body seemed to have lost its vitality. The silver scales on his body started to darken. On the other hand, Feng Wuyi's battered body seemed to gradually recover under the influence of the gold and silver lights. After a few dozen breaths, the gold and silver lights converged and a complete body appeared. The head that had been smashed by Chu Mu and the upper body that had been damaged had all recovered. His tightly shut eyes opened in an instant. The fierce light was as sharp as a sword. His throat moved, and an obscure and hoarse voice sounded. The body of a human is just so fragile. Feng Wuyi's limbs moved as he was resurrected and occupied by the one-stripe ominous demon. Secret technique. Demon Lord Reincarnation. It was a secret technique that only demon lords of the ominous demon clan could master, the reincarnation technique. Abandoning one's powerful body and entering another body in the form of a soul to occupy it. At this moment, the one-stripe ominous demon had used the Demon Lord reincarnation technique to occupy Feng Wuyi's body. Feng Wuyi's origin spirit had yet to be taken away by Chu Mu because he didn't have the chance. A fierce and brutal aura gradually spread out from Feng Wuyi's body. Feng Wuyi was resurrected, but he was no longer the original Feng Wuyi. He was now Demon Lord Feng Wuyi. "Give me your lives!" An ear-piercing voice sounded out from Feng Wuyi's mouth. Immediately after, he slashed out with his sword. Although the sword chi wasn't as smooth as before, it was still extremely powerful. It slashed through the air and killed the silver-horned beasts one after another. Dozens of silver-horned ominous demons didn't resist at all. Instead, their eyes were filled with fanaticism. After being killed, their cores were also destroyed. Invisible and pure core energy spread out and was quickly absorbed by Demon Lord Feng Wuyi. Under the pure and dense core energy of dozens of silver-horned ominous demons, Demon Lord Feng Wuyi's cultivation base rose from the mid-8th immemorial realm to the late 8th immemorial realm. He was close to the peak of the immemorial realm. If he were to fight Chu Mu again with his current cultivation base, it would be hard to say who would win. "Humans, it's time for you to die." Demon Lord Feng Wuyi chuckled. Carrying his broken sword, he quickly left the demon lair. After Chu Mu quickly left the demon nest, he felt like he was being surrounded by danger. It wasn't the danger of being chased by Lin Jintong, but something else. It seemed to be directed at him, but at the same time, it didn't seem to be directed at him. It was very strange, and Chu Mu couldn't tell what it was. After a battle in the demon lair, he successfully killed Feng Wuyi and obtained his interspatial ring. It was a pity that he didn't get his primordial spirit. Otherwise, the one-striped ominous demon wouldn't have been able to complete the Demon Lord reincarnation secret technique and take over Feng Wuyi's body. Although he escaped from dozens of silver-horned ominous demons, Chu Mu's cultivation base had also increased after absorbing the core energy of the copper-horned ominous demons. He had reached the peak of the late 8th immemorial realm, and was only a fine line away from the peak. At this moment, with Chu Mu's cultivation base and the purity of the divine desolate sword origin, the core energy of the iron-horned ominous demons was useless to him. He needed to reach the same level as the copper-horned ominous demons to achieve his goal. After leaving the demon lair, Chu Mu ran as fast as he could, searching for ominous demons to kill. The ominous demons of the Black Secret Realm were natives of the Black Secret Realm. Their cores contained pure energy, but they couldn't be brought out of the secret realm. Otherwise, as long as he killed a group of iron-horned ominous demons and kept their cores, he could bring them out after the Black Secret Realm closed. He could sell them for a high price, or use them to nurture his subordinates and increase his cultivation base rapidly. Not long after Chu Mu left the demon lair, Lin Zhentong brought Lin Ziki to the demon lair. A demon lair. Lin Zhentong's eyes flashed with joy. He could still feel Chu Mu's remnant aura. In other words, Chu Mu had been to this demon lair, and might even be in it. Entering the demon lair, the first thing he saw was the corpses of the iron-horned ominous demons. On the second floor, he saw hundreds of withered copper-horned ominous demons and dozens of silver-horned ominous demons. Lin Zhentong frowned, puzzled. Soon after, he brought Lin Ziki to the third level. It was completely empty. When they entered the fourth level, it was also completely empty. Where's the demon lord? Lin Zhentong was puzzled. If he could kill the demon lord, he could let Lin Ziki absorb its core energy. Lin Ziki's cultivation base would definitely rise by leaps and bounds, reaching a higher level. At that time, her strength wouldn't be much weaker than his. Of course, the demon lord's strength was too great, and it would be difficult to kill it. Lin Zhentong would never have guessed that the demon lord of this demon lair had already used the reincarnation secret technique to occupy the body of a human sword cultivator, while its original body had turned into dust. The demon lord reincarnation secret technique was a secret technique created by the ominous demons in the past 1,000 years. Moreover, only those who had reached the demon lord level could cultivate it. Not all demon lords could cultivate it, and only a small portion of them had the talent to master it. Lin Zhentong was experienced and knowledgeable, and it wasn't his first time entering the Dark God secret realm. However, he didn't know about the demon lord reincarnation secret technique, so he naturally wouldn't think in that direction. On the second floor, although Lin Ziki couldn't sense Chu Mu's remnant sword chi, Lin Zhentong could clearly sense it. Therefore, he brought Lin Ziki in the direction Chu Mu had left, quickly chasing after him. This was an existence that was difficult to deal with, and he had to kill it as soon as possible. Otherwise, when it grew stronger, it would definitely be a disaster. If they were outside the secret realm, Lin Zhentong wouldn't be so anxious. He had plenty of time to make arrangements. However, inside the Dark God secret realm, his cultivation base couldn't increase anymore unless he broke through and became a peerless expert. Chu Mu's cultivation base could still increase rapidly. After Demon Lord Feng Wui left the demon lair, he headed in the same direction as Chu Mu. Demon Lord Feng Wui could sense Chu Mu's remnant aura fluctuations, and his goal was naturally to kill Chu Mu. The ominous demons were intelligent. Therefore, they knew that the Dark God secret realm was connected to the outside world once every 1,000 years. They couldn't leave, but humans would enter and hunt them. At the same time, they would also hunt humans and absorb their primordial spirits to strengthen themselves and increase their strength and level. They would become stronger and obtain a higher status. Be careful of the single dogs when showing off affection on Valentine's Day. Good luck, single dogs. Chapter 1799. The primordial spirit of a human is really delicious. A silver-horned ominous demon smashed the head of a sword saint and directly grabbed the primordial spirit and stuffed it into his mouth. He said in a strange voice while chewing and swallowing. The consciousness of the primordial spirit was still there. After being chewed and swallowed, it let out an incomparably shrill scream. It wanted to explode its primordial spirit, but it was restrained by a strange force and could not do so. After swallowing the primordial spirit, the aura of this silver-horned ominous demon became stronger and more condensed. Humans hunted ominous demons and absorbed the core power to enhance their cultivation. Similarly, ominous demons hunted humans and devoured primordial spirits to strengthen themselves. The core power of the iron-horned ominous demon had no effect on Chu Mu. Therefore, even if Chu Mu encountered an iron-horned ominous demon, he would not take the initiative to kill it. It would only be a waste of his strength. Dozens of silver-horned ominous demons moved together and locked onto Chu Mu from afar. Terrifying silver light beams, like the sharpest sword light, tore through the sky. That kind of coldness and domineering aura moved Chu Mu. Sword Chi Shadow. The sword Chi Shadow shattered, but Chu Mu's real body had already turned into a streamer and quickly left. Dozens of silver-horned ominous demons, each of which had powerful strength, enough to kill an ordinary 9-star saint. In a one-on-one situation, they were naturally not Chu Mu's opponent. However, when dozens of them joined forces, even experts like Lin Jintong would be afraid. Human! Kill! Chu Mu turned and left. Dozens of silver-horned ominous demons quickly chased after him. Once the silver-horned ominous demons burst out with their speed, it was undoubtedly very fast and very astonishing. Dozens of silver streamers shot towards Chu Mu. Wherever they passed, the powerful force caused the air to explode. Bursts of terrible whistling sounds were like the surging tide. Under the dozens of silver lights, the hard ground was forcibly cut open, leaving deep ravines. Beams of silver light constantly shot out, shooting towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu, who was running wildly, constantly moved his feet and shifted his body to dodge the silver light. He only saw the silver light beams shooting past him at a speed faster than his own. The ominous demon light of the silver horn's ominous light was extremely terrifying. Even an ordinary 9-star saint at the pinnacle would be severely injured if not killed by it. Chu Mu's strength was indeed stronger than an ordinary 9-star saint at the pinnacle, but that was only in terms of attacking power. In terms of defensive power, he was still inferior. After all, his cultivation level was too low. Under such circumstances, if he was hit by a beam of ominous demon light, he would end up in a terrible state. After a quarter of an hour, the dozens of silver-horned vicious demons showed no signs of giving up. Looking at their posture, it seemed that they would not give up until they caught up with Chu Mu. I'm only one step away from the peak of the 7th sky of Immemorial Realm. If I reach the peak of the 7th sky of Immemorial Realm, I'll become even faster. If I can break through to the 8th sky of Immemorial Realm, I'll be able to fight them head-on and kill them all. Unfortunately, it was difficult to break through from the peak of the 7th sky of Immemorial Realm to the 8th sky of Immemorial Realm. The energy required was almost the same as the energy required to break through from the early stage of the 7th sky of Immemorial Realm to the peak of the 7th sky of Immemorial Realm. The plan now was to get rid of the dozens of silver-horned vicious demons and then increase his cultivation level and strength. Speaking of which, killing ferocious beasts was indeed a way to quickly increase one's cultivation. However, because of the rapid increase in cultivation, one would not be able to completely convert it into strength. It would require a considerable amount of time to settle down. Of course, fighting with powerful ferocious beasts was also a way to quickly convert one's cultivation into strength. As he ran, Chu Mu saw a group of copper-horned vicious demons in front of him. He was instantly delighted. "Kill!" he shouted in a low voice. His body became illusory, like a wisp of smoke or a swallow flying over water. There were more than a dozen copper-horned vicious demons. When they saw Chu Mu approaching, they immediately shot out bronze light beams from their third eye. Although the bronze light beams were not as powerful as the silver light beams, they were still terrifying. Chu Mu did not dare to be hit. His body flashed as he dodged the bronze light beams. He drew his sword as he approached. The misty sword light was like a cloud of mist that gradually spread out. The mist looked very ordinary, like the mist in the evening. However, there were traces of sword light in it. Wherever the mist spread out, the copper-horned vicious demons seemed to be frozen. They were motionless. Death. The heart core was destroyed and the heart core energy spread out. Chu Mu rushed over and directly absorbed the pure core force. The core force began to circulate in his meridians and quickly transformed into sword origin that poured into his dantian. His dantian surged and the sword origin lake seemed to have risen a little. His cultivation rose again. He was now at the peak of the 7th layer of the Wangu realm. Under the circulation of sword energy, Chu Mu's speed increased by another step, becoming even faster. After another 15 minutes, Chu Mu finally got rid of the dozens of silver horn vicious demons. After a while, Lin Zhentong and Lin Ziki rushed over from afar. They saw the dozens of silver horn vicious demons from afar. He drew his sword. The evil dragon appeared in the sky. It stretched out its front claws and clawed at the ground. Its tyrannical power seemed to tear the void apart. The dozens of silver horn vicious demons felt a strong pressure and a shocking sense of danger. They immediately raised their heads and shot out silver light beams. Under the dozens of silver light beams, the evil dragon in the sky was first destroyed. Then, the evil dragon was destroyed. The moment the evil dragon was destroyed, another evil dragon appeared. It opened its mouth and let out a shocking roar. The roar turned into layers of sound waves that shattered the void and rushed toward the dozens of silver horn vicious demons. Lin Zhentong drew his sword again. This time, he used the evil dragon hall's secret sword, the great evil dragon sword. A huge black evil dragon condensed in the sky. Its sharp claws seemed to tear the void apart. It roared proudly, announcing its arrival. Evil dragon descends. Darkness enveloped the land. A destructive aura descended, ready to slaughter all living things. The dozens of silver horn vicious demons went crazy. They roared one after another. Silver light flickered in their third eyes. They condensed their power to the maximum and shot it out. Dozens of blazing silver lights lit up the sky. Evil dragon descends, silver light pierced through the sky. A terrifying shockwave spread out in all directions. It could be felt from afar. Lin Zhentong's expression changed when the dark evil dragon shattered. He let out a muffled groan as his body trembled. He couldn't help but take 3 steps back. The dozens of silver-horned fierce demons trembled as blood flowed out of their third eyes. Lin Zhentong's strength was indeed terrifying. However, the dozens of silver-horned vicious demons were not weak. They could fight against him. Lin Zhentong raised his sword. The evil dragon patterns on the sword flickered. A terrifying aura spread out from the sword. It seemed to be projected into the void. An even bigger black evil dragon appeared. Black lightning revolved around the black evil dragon. It was filled with a destructive aura. The great evil dragon sword's evil dragon destroys the world. The destructive aura spread out, causing the dozens of silver-horned vicious demons to tremble. It was too terrifying. That aura made them feel a fatal danger. Kill! 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 Facing the terrifying might of the evil dragon destroys the world, the dozens of silver-horned vicious demons didn't have any thoughts of leaving. Instead, they let out a final roar. Their killing intent soared to the sky. The horns of the silver-horned fierce demons lit up with silver light and turned into silver flames. Their auras also grew stronger and stronger. They burned their horns and poured all their power into their third eyes. The light in their third eyes was as resplendent as the sun. Dozens of silver lights that were several times more intense than the previous ones shot into the sky. They shot towards the terrifying evil dragon. The evil dragon descended with supreme power. It wanted to destroy the world. With one collision, the earth shook. Cracks quickly spread out. It was as if countless lightning bolts were tearing the earth apart. In the blink of an eye, thousands of cracks that were more than 10,000 meters long separated the earth. In the sky, the huge destructive evil dragon collapsed. It turned into terrifying black lightning bolts and bombarded in all directions. It was as if the sky was about to shatter. The bodies of the dozens of silver-horned fierce demons began to shatter and collapse under the impact of this terrifying power. Even their most solid cores were not spared. The pure heart core energy spread out rapidly. Lin Zhentong could only be anxious. He had killed the dozens of silver horn vicious demons so that Lin Ziki could absorb and increase her cultivation. The core energy of the dozens of silver horn vicious demons was enough to increase Lin Ziki's cultivation. Now, the dozens of silver horn dire demons had indeed been killed by him. However, the energy waves from the collision were too strong, and Lin Ziki couldn't get close at all. Her pure core force was also gradually dispersing under the terrifying energy wave. Lin Jintong had no choice but to go forward himself. He withstood the terrifying energy fluctuations and absorbed the core energy to recover his sword origin. After escaping, Chu Mu was even more careful. Once the number of silver horn vicious demons exceeded 10, he would immediately leave. If there were less than 10, he would kill them. Under such circumstances, Chu Mu's cultivation increased little by little as he absorbed the core energy. On the basis of the peak seventh sky of the Aeon realm, it continued to rise and gradually approach the limit. Finally, Chu Mu's cultivation reached the limit of the seventh sky of the Aeon realm, as he wished. Next, it's time to break through, Chu Mu thought. His eyes shone brightly. In a situation where he couldn't use his sword intent, the power of his sword would naturally drop by more than a level. His overall strength would also drop. Currently, he could only use the increase in his cultivation to make up for the drop in strength. At the peak of the seventh sky of the Aeon realm, Chu Mu estimated that if he fought Lin Jintong again, he wouldn't be as miserable as before. If he could reach the eighth sky of the Aeon realm, the situation might be reversed. Chapter 1800. It was the 25th day since the opening of the Black God's secret realm. As the core energy was absorbed, a wave of aura emanated from Chu Mu's body. It became more condensed and powerful. The aura of the seventh sky of the Wangu realm began to break through and reach a higher level. The unstable eighth layer aura pervaded Chu Mu's surroundings and gradually calmed down. His cultivation base had finally broken through to the early eighth sky of the Wangu realm. Although it was still unstable, it was much stronger than when he was at the seventh sky of the Wangu realm. A vague sense of danger had been lingering around Chu Mu. This sense of danger came from Lin Jintong. There's no need to be afraid, Chu Mu thought to himself. The feeling of danger was not a good thing. Previously, Chu Mu could only run away because he was not strong enough. Now that his cultivation base and strength had increased, he had achieved his goal of entering the Black God's secret realm. There was no need for him to be afraid anymore. He continued to hunt for fierce demons and absorb the core energy to stabilize his cultivation base. The sword origin of the eighth sky of the Wangu realm was not only 10 times more powerful than that of the seventh sky of the Wangu realm, but it was also 10 times purer. Furthermore, the recovery speed of the sword origin had also increased. A powerful feeling reverberated in his body. Chu Mu knew that the current him was much stronger than when he first entered the Black God's secret realm. However, he didn't know exactly how strong he had become. When he struck out, the sword light was like an invisible brush that streaked across the air. Then, it spread out as if it was soaked in water. It was like smoke and mist everywhere it went. The fierce demons could not resist the sword light at all. Even the silver-horned fierce demons were no exception. The mist-like sword chi pierced through their bodies and penetrated their hearts. Absorb. Almost there. Lin Jintong's eyes flashed with joy. He left behind a very obscure trace of his aura to track Chu Mu. His purpose was to catch up to Chu Mu and kill him as soon as possible to prevent future troubles. However, Chu Mu was very crafty. If he had gone all out to chase after him, he would have long since caught up. Unfortunately, with Lin Ziki, his speed was slowed down. Furthermore, with Chu Mu's cultivation base, his speed would also increase, making it even more difficult to chase after him. However, as Lin Ziki's cultivation increased, her speed also increased. Her tracking speed also increased. The distance between her and Chu Mu was gradually closing. Right now, Lin Ziki's cultivation base was at the mid-stage of the 8th layer of the Wangu realm. Due to the fact that his cultivation base had increased too quickly, he hadn't fully converted it into his actual strength. He was only comparable to a mid-level 9-star Saint Realm expert. However, if he had enough time to fully control his cultivation base and convert it into his actual strength, he would be able to take on a high-level 9-star Saint Realm expert. Soon, a figure appeared in front of Lin Jintong and Lin Ziki. "Father, we caught up." Lin Ziki's eyes flashed with joy. "This time, don't even think about escaping." Lin Jintong's killing intent surged as he sped up. He turned into a streak of black light and charged towards Chu Mu at lightning speed. Lin Ziki's strength was comparable to a mid-level 9-star Saint Realm Master. Even if she encountered 2 or 3 silver horn fierce beasts, she would still be able to deal with them. Naturally, he would be able to react in time to rescue her. Not to mention, under the coverage of his soul force, there were no Mystic Realm fierce beasts in a large area. Lin Jintong wanted to take this opportunity to kill Chu Mu to prevent any future troubles. As the black streak of light approached, Chu Mu turned around. A sharp light flashed in his eyes as he opened his arms wide, holding a sword in each hand. With both swords in hand, he launched an attack. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." With a low growl, the 2 swords trembled slightly. Like the wings of an eagle, Chu Mu's speed increased in an instant. The 2 streaks of light approached each other and collided. In an instant, they had exchanged hundreds of blows, but they were evenly matched. Even with Lin Ziki's eyesight, she couldn't see the exchange between the 2. She only felt that it had flashed by. "Your strength is actually..." Lin Jintong's expression changed. Before this, Chu Mu couldn't resist at all under his sword. But now, with the improvement of his cultivation, Chu Mu actually had the qualifications to fight against him. "Sure enough, I can't let you live," Lin Jintong said again. His voice was filled with cold, killing intent. "You think that even if your cultivation has improved, you can fight against me? How naive." As he spoke, Lin Jintong's sword was merciless. Every strike was at full force, each strike was fatal. The evil dragons on the sword seemed to have come alive. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws. The power of darkness and lightning poured out continuously, bombarding Chu Mu. Lin Jintong was determined to kill Chu Mu and not give him a chance to live. Otherwise, once Chu Mu's cultivation improved again, it would be more difficult to kill him. Little did Lin Jintong know that after Chu Mu's cultivation improved and his strength increased, he also had the intention to kill Lin Jintong. They were evenly matched and it was a life-and-death battle. Under the sword, the surrounding ground was cut open. The distant Lin Ziki was extremely shocked. She never would have thought that Chu Mu had already grown to the point where he could fight against her father. "Kill, we must kill him." Lin Ziki clenched the sword in his hand and said to himself. If Chu Mu didn't die, he wouldn't be at ease. Unfortunately, he wasn't strong enough. He couldn't interfere in a battle of this level. Otherwise, if he joined forces with his father, they would definitely be able to kill Chu Mu faster. In a direct confrontation, Chu Mu wasn't at a disadvantage at all. The killing intent in Lin Jintong's heart became more and more intense. It shot out from his body and filled the surroundings, causing the power of his sword technique to increase. Evil Dragon Sword Technique. Lin Jintong used the Evil Dragon Sword technique that he was most proficient in. Evil Dragon Claw, Evil Dragon Roar, Evil Dragon Charge, Evil Dragon Tail Whip. After grasping the essence of each move, Chu Mu had modified the Evil Dragon Sword technique into the most suitable sword moves for himself. When Lin Jintong used them, the pressure on Chu Mu instantly increased. Under the 2 swords, the Cloud Piercer slashed out, destroying the moves of the Evil Dragon Sword technique and counterattacking. Fierce, cold, and sharp, the Evil Dragon Sword tore through the void and brazenly slashed out. Shortly after, Lin Jintong opened his mouth and his throat squirmed. An incomparably terrifying sound wave rushed out. The Evil Dragon Sword technique's Evil Dragon Roar. This move wasn't used with the sword, but with the mouth. When a sword technique was cultivated to an extremely profound level and completely grasped the essence, and after constantly modifying it to suit oneself, one could use more methods to display its power. This was the first time that Chu Mu had seen such a level. In terms of sword technique realm, Lin Jintong was inferior to Chu Mu. However, in terms of the application of sword technique, Lin Jintong had been immersed in it for more than 10 times longer than Chu Mu. Some of the applications were something that the current Chu Mu hadn't expected. Caught off guard, Chu Mu's protective sword aura was shattered by the sound wave. At the critical moment, he used the sword chi shadow, but the sword chi shadow was shattered. A resplendent sword light slashed down. Lin Jintong's figure was directly slashed apart. It was just an afterimage. Lin Jintong's figure spun, and his leg lashed out like a long whip. It carried a terrifying sharpness and power, as if his leg had transformed into a sharp sword. It was like an evil dragon tail whip, and its terrifying power could shatter the heavens. Evil Dragon Sword Technique, Evil Dragon Tail Whip. Cultivating the sword technique into one's body was a new realm. Under the Evil Dragon Tail Whip, the sword in Lin Jintong's hand didn't stop. He directly used the Evil Dragon Claws, attacking from above and below. It was simply similar to the dual sword technique. After the afterimage was shattered, Chu Mu took a step forward and stepped into the blind spot of the Evil Dragon Tail Whip. He raised his knee, and it was like a sharp sword piercing upwards from below. Incomparably sharp sword chi shot out, and his two swords revolved and intersected, forming endless sword light. There were crosses and circles, and they were densely packed together. His two swords, elbows, knees, toes, and so on, seemed to have transformed into swords. They were astonishingly sharp, and their power was terrifying. Lin Jintong had opened a door for Chu Mu, a door that allowed him to use his sword technique more thoroughly. Chu Mu was indeed a monster, but a monster was still a human, and he had his shortcomings. Therefore, it was important to gather the wisdom of the masses. Such talent! Lin Jintong was even more shocked. Such talent was too terrifying. This time, no matter what, he had to kill Chu Mu. Even if he had to pay a certain price, he wouldn't hesitate to do so. After using the basic sword technique to every part of his body, Chu Mu's fighting ability instantly increased by several times. Lin Jintong's fighting technique was like a key that opened a door that Chu Mu hadn't touched yet. After opening it, with Chu Mu's shocking comprehension and incomparably profound control over his body, he was able to easily integrate the various moves of the basic sword technique into his body. His fingers, elbows, shoulders, legs, knees, and other parts of his body could instantly transform into sharp weapons, transforming into swords, and blossoming with astonishing sharpness. Damn it! Lin Jintong's expression was extremely ugly. A terrifying aura spread out, and a huge, evil dragon appeared. The great evil dragon sword's evil dragon descends. Huge claws viciously slashed down, tearing through the void. A terrifying pressure crashed onto Chu Mu's body, causing his body to freeze. Cutting path. With a low roar, a sound wave like sword chi shot out. The two swords formed a cross-sword light, and with the power of the cutting path, it charged towards the dark evil dragon. The cross-sword light shone brightly, dispelling the darkness and illuminating a corner of the sky. The dark evil dragon's sharp claws slashed down, as if pieces of space were being grabbed and torn apart, clashing with the cross-sword light. The great evil dragon sword was an inherited sword technique, and it was a powerful inherited sword technique that was second only to the silver sword technique. When used by a dark star sword saint, its power was extremely terrifying. Chu Mu's cutting path was also an inherited sword technique in terms of level, and it wasn't something that an ordinary inherited sword technique could compare to. With the combination of the two swords, the power was multiplied. Kill. The dark evil dragon's claws were shattered, but the cross-sword light continued to attack, shattering the dark evil dragon's forelimbs and heading towards its head. The huge mouth opened, and a terrifying roar that left a mark in the void rang out. The impact of the sound wave caused the cross sword light to tremble and crack. Chapter 1801. The sword was a weapon, an extension of one's arm. One with the sword. The sword and the person were inseparable, as if they were connected by blood. Under this realm, all kinds of sword techniques would be displayed to the extreme. Sword in the heart surpassed the one with the sword level. This was the current level of sword technique Chu Mu had reached. However, he still felt that his grasp of the sword in the heart realm was not enough, far from enough. It felt like he had a mountain of gold, but he couldn't excavate it. Even so, this level of sword technique still allowed Chu Mu to surpass the man and sword union level in using the sword. At this moment, after grasping the sword transformation technique, Chu Mu's understanding of the one with the sword deepened. He immediately understood that perhaps the reason he hadn't excavated the potential of the sword in the heart realm was because he hadn't studied it enough. There was still a part of it that he hadn't fully grasped. Thinking back to the powerful opponents he had faced in the past, their sword technique realms were indeed inferior to his. However, some of them were even superior to him in terms of sword technique usage. Lin Zhentong was like this, and so was King Xuanmiao. Chu Mu was sure that King Xuanmiao's sword technique realm hadn't reached the sword in the heart realm. For some reason, he was only at the limit of one with the sword. However, he had excavated the potential of one with the sword to the extreme. Perhaps I should revisit the one with the sword realm, Chu Mu thought in the middle of the battle. However, now wasn't the time. There were still powerful enemies, so he had to kill them first. The dark evil dragon shattered under the sword light. Lin Zhentong's legs instantly shot out, rolling up terrifying lightning and surging clouds. Although he wasn't using a sword, Chu Mu felt that it wouldn't be any weaker than a sword. Two thunderous sword chi that seemed capable of shattering mountains bombarded Chu Mu. Following that, Lin Zhentong used the second move of the Great Evil Dragon Sword, Evil Dragon Annihilation. An even larger dark evil dragon appeared, surrounded by black lightning. It crazily swam, carrying with it a destructive aura. The evil dragon destroys the world unleashed by a dark star sword saint was powerful enough to instantly destroy a huge mountain and raze it to the ground. Seeing Lin Zhentong use this move again, Lin Ziki was incomparably excited, his blood surging. Kill, kill, kill. Kill him! Lin Ziki growled, his eyes turning red. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have enough strength, he would have already raised his sword and charged over. It was low and oppressive. The terrifying pressure made it difficult for Chu Mu to breathe. The evil dragon destroying the world was indeed terrifying. There seemed to be flames burning in Chu Mu's eyes. If you're an evil dragon, then I'll kill you. Silver God equipment equip. Tao Crusher, Cloud Piercer. Both swords attacked consecutively in that instant. His 8th Firmament Sword Origin was fully activated, and his 5th Firmament Saint Physique was also activated. Under the fusion of Vital Chi technique, they combined perfectly and unleashed an even more tyrannical power. Kill. The dazzling sword light pierced through the air. There was an earth-shattering collision, and an unparalleled destructive aura swept out in all directions. The hard ground was completely shattered. Chunks of rock flew into the air, each one weighing thousands of kilograms. Even an expert like Lin Ziki didn't dare to take a direct hit from these chunks of rock. And under the terrifying shock waves, the chunks of rock that flew into the air crumbled inch by inch, turning into dust that scattered in the air. Chu Mu and Lin Zhentong's figures were covered by the dust, and the chaotic energy fluctuations prevented them from being detected by spiritual energy. Streaks of black lightning flashed across the sky, filled with a destructive aura. Soon, the dust settled. Two figures stood facing each other with a distance of dozens of meters between them. On the ground, there were cracks as thick as thighs. In the center, there was a huge pit that was dozens of meters wide and at least 10 meters deep. Chu Mu and Lin Zhentong stood at the edge of the huge pit, facing each other from afar. The tyrannical collision had caused terrible damage. One should know that the ground of the Black Mystery Realm was very hard, and a full-force attack from a mid-level Saint expert would at most leave a faint mark. An ordinary 9-star Saint expert's attack would at most create a pit that was a few meters deep. Lin Jintong had never thought that Chu Mu would be able to block his full-force Evil Dragon Destroys the World. It wasn't easy for Chu Mu to block this attack, and he had done his best with his silver divine armor. He guessed that the early stage of the 8th immemorial realm should be able to contend with Lin Jintong. That was right, but it was still a little difficult. After all, his cultivation base had risen rapidly, and there was not enough time for him to fully convert it into his strength. Moreover, sword intent was an indispensable part of sword art. It could be said that the impact of not being able to use sword essence was greater than Chu Mu realized. Chu Mu even showed a hint of hesitation. Should he use his sword intent? Soon, he threw away his hesitation. Once he used sword essence, all his previous efforts would be in vain. He still had other means. It seems like I won't be able to kill you without paying a price. Lin Jintong's killing intent was almost tangible, and it was like an evil dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it surrounded his body. Then, he held the sword with both hands and injected all his strength into the evil dragon sword. In addition to strength, one could also see traces of blood being injected into the evil dragon sword. Lin Jintong's face gradually turned pale. He was guiding the blood essence into the evil dragon sword. After receiving the blood essence, the evil dragon sword seemed to come alive and trembled continuously. At first, it was faint, but it gradually became stronger. Secret art of war. Lin Jintong's hoarse voice rang out. The evil dragon sword in his hand instantly flew out and soared into the sky. A terrifying aura spread out. Wind and lightning surged, and darkness filled the air. The runes on the evil dragon sword lit up, as if it had left the sword. It soared into the sky and let out a shocking roar filled with a destructive aura. The red evil dragon sword swooped down, and its 4 limbs grabbed onto the sword. Its body was also attached to the sword as it fell vertically with the evil dragon sword. It seemed as if Lin Jintong was going to commit suicide. The evil dragon sword and the evil dragon sword went straight for Lin Jintong's head. A strange thing happened. The sword and the evil dragon sword entered Lin Jintong's head and disappeared. Lin Jintong's body trembled. His face was hideous, as if he was enduring great pain. He let out a roar. Evil dragon transformation. These 3 words shook the heavens and the earth. It was as if they wanted to force out all the pain. Lin Jintong's body trembled violently, as if he was shaking a sieve. His robe instantly burst open, and a red light rushed out of his body. Scales grew out of his body. His life essence seemed to be changing. His body swelled and grew taller. His arms turned into dragon claws, and his legs also turned into dragon claws. The terrifying aura was more than 10 times stronger than before. Threads of red light danced around him like electric arcs. He was over 2 meters tall, and his body was incomparably strong. With a single glance, one could tell that he had astonishing defensive power. The sinister evil dragon head had scarlet eyes. It was ice-cold and bloodthirsty, and its killing intent was like water. Its thick arms and incomparably sharp claws were the epitome of incomparable sharpness. There were also blades on its elbows that shone with a cold light. This was completely a human-shaped vicious beast, a human-shaped weapon. Secret technique. Evil dragon transformation. This was the highest secret technique of the Evil Dragon Palace. Currently, only the 3 palace masters and the first elder knew it. This secret technique was extremely difficult to cultivate. It required the soul of a flood dragon. Flood dragons were extremely tyrannical spirit beasts, and they were extremely rare. Even if they did, most people wouldn't be willing to extract their souls to cultivate this secret technique. The reason why the Evil Dragon Palace was called the Evil Dragon Palace was because they had a secret technique to cultivate flood dragons. However, the process was rather sinister, so they were called evil dragons, which meant evil flood dragons. Under the evil dragon transformation, Lin Zhentong still retained his rationality. However, an intense killing intent filled his mind. This killing intent wasn't targeted at anyone. It was the killing intent of the evil dragon's soul itself. It was a killing intent that could destroy everything. If Lin Zhentong couldn't suppress this killing intent and lost his rationality, he would directly transform into a vicious beast that would bring disaster to the world. Chu Mu die. The hoarse and low voice didn't have much of Lin Zhentong's intonation, but it contained the roar of a vicious beast. Chu Mu felt like he was seeing an evil dragon roaring. The terrifying killing intent was so condensed that it seemed solid. It surged over like a surging tide, almost suffocating Chu Mu. Because the killing intent was too dense, the surrounding air became viscous. Under the pressure of the killing intent, the air was expelled. In an instant, Chu Mu only saw a red light flash before his eyes. Under the evil dragon transformation, Lin Zhentong had already arrived. The red light flashed like lightning, and his sharp claws directly tore through the void. This was a true tear. Under the red light, a black scar appeared in the void. Fast, it was simply too fast. It was so fast that it was indescribable. It was so fast that Chu Mu couldn't catch it. Furthermore, although this claw seemed to be an attack with claws, it actually contained a sword technique. At this moment, the essence of the evil dragon sword technique was finally displayed. Evil dragon claws. Under the evil dragon transformation, Lin Zhentong had turned into a humanoid evil dragon. His claws tore through the void. This was the evil dragon claws, not just in name but in reality. Lin Zhentong's instincts, honed through countless battles between life and death, came into play. He instantly raised his sword to block. However, this tyrannical claw contained an incomparably terrifying power. Under the impact, Chu Mu felt the sword in his hand tremble, almost flying out of his hand. Under the huge impact, the bones in his hand seemed to have been damaged. Bursts of pain came from his hand, and his arm seemed to be unable to support itself. Creaking sounds came from it. Chu Mu's entire body flew backwards. Before he could even use his two swords to counterattack, Lin Zhentong's second attack followed closely behind. Chapter 1802. Streaks of red lightning seemed to appear out of thin air as they shot towards Chu Mu. Every streak of red lightning represented an attack from Lin Zhentong. Every time he attacked, he would use all of his strength in order to maximize his lethality. The evil dragon transformation was not a secret technique that could be casually used. It had to be known that when the evil dragon's soul entered his body and fused with his body, Lin Zhentong would have to endure a great deal of pain. That kind of pain was equivalent to having all the bones in his body being broken and reconstructed, his muscles being torn apart and reconstructed, and his veins being stretched, broken, and reconstructed. Just imagining that kind of pain was equivalent to having one's entire body torn apart would cause many people to shrink back. However, this was only the first side effect of the evil dragon transformation. The second side effect was the consumption of blood essence. Using the evil dragon transformation required one's own strength and blood essence as a primer. Strength alone was not enough. One needed blood essence to successfully guide and use it smoothly. Moreover, the consumed blood essence could not be quickly recovered. If one did not have any pills that could restore blood essence, they could only slowly recover in the future. Losing blood essence for a long period of time would also have a negative effect on one's body, possibly leaving behind some negative side effect. That was not all. There was a third side effect, and that was the berserk and chaotic consciousness contained within the evil dragon's soul. This berserk and chaotic consciousness contained a sharp killing intent, and was not something that could be easily tamed. The person who used the evil dragon transformation would have to constantly endure its attacks, and had to use their own willpower to suppress it in order to maintain their rationality. If one was not careful and could not suppress it, it was very likely that they would be affected by the berserk and chaotic consciousness, becoming a person without much rationality. They might even be directly replaced, becoming a crazy demon without the slightest shred of rationality. On the bright side, Lin Jintong was currently using his strong willpower to suppress the berserk and chaotic consciousness. However, the dense killing intent was constantly affecting him. It was fine for a short period of time, but as time passed, the influence would become more and more obvious. He would gradually be assimilated bit by bit, and in the end the suppression would weaken, and he would be in danger. Lin Jintong didn't hold back at all. Every move he made was for the sake of killing Chu Mu in the shortest amount of time possible and dispelling the evil dragon transformation. Otherwise, it would be disadvantageous to him in the long run. However, Chu Mu displayed astonishing tenacity. He allowed Lin Jintong to constantly attack him and just barely managed to hold on. Of course, this was also related to his silver godly equipment. The silver godly equipment possessed great defensive power and could block Lin Jintong's attacks to a certain extent. If he did not have the silver god equipment, Chu Mu would probably not be able to withstand a few attacks before being injured. If he was injured again, the consequences would be dire. Under the evil dragon transformation, Lin Jintong's strength, speed, defense, explosiveness, and other aspects were all significantly improved. He was like a killing machine, attacking madly and completely foregoing defense. In fact, he didn't need to defend because his speed was extremely fast. It was faster than Chu Mu's sight and reaction speed. Chu Mu could only rely on his silver godly equipment and his subconscious that had been trained from countless life and death situations to block the attack. However, it was already very difficult for him to counterattack. Although the two swords blocked the attacks again and again, the huge impact still caused Chu Mu's arms to ache. Fortunately, the silver godly equipment reduced a portion of the impact. Fortunately, his saint body had reached the middle stage of the 5th rank. Otherwise, he would have already been defeated. Even so, Chu Mu couldn't react in time from the beginning. He was in a passive position. A portion of the huge impact seeped into his body. It contained a terrifying sharpness and cut, causing Chu Mu to feel as if he was being dismembered. Counterattack, counterattack, counterattack. Gradually, a thought formed in Chu Mu's mind. He had to counterattack. If he didn't, he would be in a disadvantageous position if he continued to be attacked. He had to find an opportunity to counterattack. However, he was currently in a passive position. Even blocking with his two swords was difficult, not to mention counterattacking. Thus, if he wanted to counterattack, he had to first block the opponent's attack. And to block the opponent's attack, he had to be able to see or sense the opponent's attack trajectory. The speed was too fast. Even if Chu Mu used his intense sword, he couldn't see it clearly. This wasn't because his intense sword was useless, but because Lin Jintong's speed was beyond his ability to capture. After being hit again, Chu Mu barely managed to cross his two swords to block the attack. Under the huge impact, Chu Mu was once again sent flying. He took advantage of this opportunity to forcefully explode with power. He vibrated his muscles and pushed the air, causing him to retreat even faster. Chu Mu planned to use this to increase the distance between him and Lin Jintong and gain some time to breathe. Lin Ziki watched from afar. His eyes emitted a blazing light. His arms unconsciously tightened. It was too exciting. It was simply indescribable. He didn't expect his father to be so powerful. He didn't expect the evil dragon transformation to be so terrifying. As Lin Jintong's only son, he had the opportunity to cultivate the evil dragon transformation. Lin Ziki didn't know the side effects of the evil dragon transformation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thought this way. Seeing Chu Mu being completely suppressed and being torn apart, he felt an indescribable excitement in his heart. In the end, when he saw Chu Mu being sent flying hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye, the excitement in his heart reached an extreme. So what if he was the seventh star? So what if he was the unparalleled sword star? So what if his talent was greater than his strength? In the end, he was still going to die. This was the result of making an enemy out of him. After sending Chu Mu flying with one strike, Lin Zhentong chased after him again. He didn't plan to give Chu Mu any time to breathe. However, Chu Mu still exploded with speed. In an instant, the distance between him and Lin Zhentong increased a little. Although he closed the gap in an instant, he still gained some time to breathe. This was enough. Realm of Silence, activate. Instantly, everything around him became more than 10 times clearer. The red lightning that Lin Zhentong had transformed into was no longer that difficult to grasp. His attack trajectory was also slightly grasped by Chu Mu. Sword God's Descent, activate. The power of the secret technique hidden in his body was instantly activated. It was as if it had come alive. With a speed that was much faster than Lin Zhentong's, it circulated through his body and poured into the two swords. It caused the sharpness of the two swords to increase by 10 times. Demon Vanquishing Vambrace, activate. The strength and speed of the two arms were increased. Sword Domain, activate. The sword domain only covered Chu Mu's body. Because his sword domain couldn't affect Lin Zhentong in the slightest. Since that was the case, why waste the power? He could just use it on himself. If not for the fact that he didn't have the opportunity, Chu Mu also planned to use the Divine Wilderness Origin Restoration secret technique. However, even if he was given a few dozen breaths of time, he might not be able to use the Divine Wilderness Origin Restoration secret technique. The use of this secret technique was not only related to one's mastery, but also directly related to the environment. In a place where the yuan qi of heaven and earth was rich and vigorous, one could naturally use it quickly. But in a place like the Black God Mystic Realm, where the yuan qi of heaven and earth was thin and the vitality was weak, it would take an unknown amount of time to successfully use the Divine Wilderness Origin Restoration secret technique. Increase, increase, increase. Lin Zhentong keenly felt the change in Chu Mu's aura. Its sharpness had increased by 10 times. Die! He roared again. It was like the roar of an evil dragon. The sound waves rushed out and could easily crush an ordinary 9-star saint-level expert. His sharp claws slashed out again. The two claws tore the space apart. Black cracks appeared, as if a brush was drawing on a white paper. Previously, Chu Mu couldn't judge such a trajectory and could only rely on his subconscious to barely resist. But now, he could vaguely capture the trajectory of Lin Zhentong's sharp claws. The two swords attacked. From being beaten passively, he began to take the initiative. Under the transformation of the sword light, it accurately hit the two claws. Although the tenfold sharpness didn't completely repel the claws, it still managed to block them for a moment. With the true meaning of tremor, the two swords vibrated and repelled the claws. Sword style cloud piercing. Counterattack. Chu Mu seized the opportunity and began his counterattack. Lin Zhentong was incomparably shocked. He couldn't imagine that Chu Mu could still counterattack in such a situation. It was too inconceivable. His killing intent towards Chu Mu had reached its peak. Kill, kill, kill. No matter what, even if he was injured, he had to kill his opponent. Otherwise, once the evil dragon transformation's duration was up and automatically ended, his blood essence would be depleted and he would only be able to use 10% of his strength. In such a situation, it would be difficult to escape death. If he died, even his only son Lin Ziki wouldn't be able to escape. Therefore, for himself, for his only son Lin Ziki, he had to kill his opponent. He had to kill his opponent before the evil dragon transformation ended. With such a firm belief, Lin Zhentong's killing intent became even more intense. His strength seemed to have increased, and the speed of his claws increased by a notch. The tail behind him lashed out fiercely. With a swing, it seemed to be able to shatter a mountain. It carried a terrifying force. It was too fast. Even though Chu Mu had already sensed it, it was difficult for him to dodge. Unable to dodge, he could only meet force with force. The true meaning of sword, the true meaning of tremor. Zhen Tian's sword style. Rumbling sounds filled the air. Under the collision, the sword was rebounded, but Lin Zhentong's tail only paused for a moment before continuing to lash out. Tyrannical. It was too tyrannical. The incomparably huge strength was at least at the level of a 6th-level saint body. The tough scales had an astonishing defensive power. They forcibly resisted Zhen Tian's sword style's bombardment. Unexpectedly, only a few pieces were shattered, and they quickly recovered. At this moment, Lin Zhentong's strength, speed, defensive power, reflexes, self-healing ability, and other aspects had all reached an astonishing level. It was a level that made people helpless. Chapter 1803. The eternal spiritual sword was rebounded, and the strong rebounding force hit his palm and arm. Seeing the tail with terrible power, Chu Mu moved his right hand, and the blazing brilliance spiritual sword collided with the eternal spiritual sword. His left hand exerted force, and combined the rebounding force with the impact of the blazing brilliance spiritual sword. He displayed the Zhen Tian sword move for the second time. This sword move put a greater burden on Chu Mu's arm, and his bones emitted a sound of being unable to bear the burden. But the power was equally strong, and was equal to the power of 2 Zhen Tian sword moves superimposed. Once again, the sword and the tail seemed to stop for a moment, and time and space froze. The next moment, sawtooth ripples exploded from the point of collision between the sword and the tail, and spread in all directions. The ground was broken, and a deep gully was opened. The sky also seemed to be torn apart, and a touch of darkness filled the air. The amazing rebounding force once again erupted. Chu Mu only felt the sword body rebounding, and the muscles of his left arm seemed to be torn apart. His tendons and veins were damaged, and cracks appeared on his bones. He hurriedly retreated, using the momentum to open up a distance, and buy himself time to heal and dissipate the force. The strong impact and rebounding force caused Lin Zhentong's tail to be flung back after a pause. The huge force pushed his body back a few meters before he could stabilize himself, and Chu Mu had already taken the opportunity to retreat dozens of meters away. Just as he stabilized himself, Lin Zhentong exploded again, turning into a red lightning, and shot towards Chu Mu. Conviction, the conviction to kill, the determination to kill. Chu Mu was so difficult to deal with, and he could not let him go. Otherwise, if his cultivation increased by a small level, he would not be able to do anything to him. Father! In the distance, Lin Ziki almost forgot to breathe. She originally thought that Chu Mu was going to be killed, but she did not expect him to be so tenacious. He allowed her father to attack with all his strength, and was able to hold on until now, and even made a counterattack. Such an enemy was too terrifying. At this moment, Lin Ziki's heart was filled with a trace of regret. If she had known this, she would not have threatened him at the auction. Even if she had threatened him, she would not have sent the barracks to kill him, and they would not have become enemies. It was too late to say anything now. He had to die. There had never been a moment when Lin Ziki hated herself so much. She hated herself for not being strong enough. Otherwise, she would have been able to fight side by side with her father and kill strong enemies. Under Lin Zhentong's all-out attack, Chu Mu defended and looked for an opportunity to counterattack. However, there were very few opportunities to counterattack. Furthermore, every time he tried to counterattack, Lin Zhentong would block it. In terms of strength and speed, they were no match for Lin Zhentong in the evil dragon transformation state. However, Lin Zhentong's defense was extremely strong, and it was hard to break through. Even if it was equivalent to the combined power of 2 of Zhen Tian's sword moves, it only shattered a dozen scales on its tail. It didn't take long for the tail to recover to its original state. Chu Mu used his right hand to fight. His left hand was still recovering and was barely holding on. There were many marks on the silver armor. They were the marks left behind by Lin Jintong's claw power. Slow. My sword is really too slow. It needs to be faster, much faster, much faster, Chu Mu thought to himself. However, he had already used all his strength to attack and increase the speed of his sword. This was already his limit. He couldn't increase it any further. Do I really have to use sword intent? In truth, other than using sword intent, Chu Mu had another choice. He could escape. He could explode with his own speed and focus on escaping. Of course, even if he did escape, the chances were very, very small. After all, Lin Jintong's speed was just too fast. It was completely above his own. Did he really have to use sword intent? Suddenly, Chu Mu thought back to his sword battle with King Xuanmiao. Neither of them used any power. It was just a simple clash of sword technique. In terms of sword speed, King Xuanmiao was no match for Chu Mu. However, he firmly defended against every one of Chu Mu's attacks and even counterattacked. No matter how Chu Mu's sword changed, no matter how fast it moved, he was unable to break through King Xuanmiao's sword technique and truly hit him. Chu Mu had once spent some time to comprehend King Xuanmiao's way of the sword. However, due to the lack of many factors, he was unable to grasp it. King Xuanmiao's sword technique is the limit of man and sword as one. After immersing himself in it for hundreds of years, the sword in his hand is completely one with him. Even his sword technique is practically one with him. With a single thought, his sword will immediately move according to his will. Ordinary people use strength to control their sword. Experts use qi to control their swords. However, true experts used their will to control their sword. Strength, qi, and spirit. These were 3 levels of change. It was an increase in level. Controlling and controlling were also 2 different levels. In King Xuanmiao's sword technique, although the sword was in his hand, it wasn't his hand that was controlling the sword. It was his will, or in other words, his spirit will. Thinking up to this point, Chu Mu suddenly had a feeling of enlightenment. Then, he thought of Lin Jintong's sword technique before he used the evil dragon transformation. His hands and legs could be used as swords to display sword technique. This was also a manifestation of sword technique. Now, when Lin Jintong used the evil dragon transformation, he didn't have a sword in his hand. However, his claws, his tail, and his legs could all be used as swords. With the sharpness of a sword, he could display sword technique. A kind of enlightenment suddenly appeared in Chu Mu's mind. Like throwing a brick to attract jade, Chu Mu's various comprehensions that he had accumulated in the past were connected bit by bit, becoming complete. He then verified them with the sword of heaven and earth, further deepening his understanding. In an instant, Chu Mu entered a state of enlightenment. Although he had entered a state of enlightenment, his subconscious that had been tempered thousands of times came into play. He controlled the 2 swords to defend himself. Combined with the silver armor, he blocked Lin Jintong's attacks again and again. Many times, for many people, enlightenment was something that could only be encountered by chance. It was even rare to have one in their entire life. A single moment of enlightenment could often allow them to grasp the mysteries that would take decades, centuries, or even millennia to grasp in a short period of time. As his thoughts flew, the sword image in his mind also emitted traces of light. The runes on the sword lit up one by one. More and more comprehensions appeared. They danced like spirals, integrated, and were absorbed. Once again, Lin Jintong's claws struck out from the left and right. In the end, he swung his tail and completed 3 consecutive strikes. The 3 consecutive strikes broke through Chu Mu's defense and struck his chest. With a boom, Chu Mu was sent flying. His chest caved in. Under the huge impact, several of Chu Mu's ribs broke. A terrifying force reverberated through his body, attacking his organs in an attempt to destroy them. A mouthful of blood surged up to his mouth. He could not help but spit it out. This strike also interrupted Chu Mu's enlightenment. At the same time, Chu Mu also understood. Where the heart goes, the sword goes, Chu Mu murmured as he spat out a mouthful of blood. The pressure seemed to disappear. There was a saying that the bigger the heart, the bigger the stage. It could also be understood that the faster the heart, the faster the sword. The unity of man and sword was the unity of man and sword. The focus was on man and sword. Using man to control the sword was the unity of man and sword. The sword in the heart was a higher level of the unity of man and sword. It was above the unity of man and sword. Only with the sword in the heart could one control the sword with the heart. It was like using one spirit to control the sword. The heart was the spirit. It was a mysterious and unfathomable power. Only with the sword in the heart could one control the sword with the heart. Only with the heart could one control the sword with the heart. Even if the epiphany was interrupted, the epiphany was still comprehended. As a result, he understood the essence of the state of the heart. He had been stuck at a bottleneck for a long time, but now, he had broken through once again. The later stage of the state of the heart. Using the heart to control the sword, the heart and sword are one. My heart is the heart of the sword, and the heart of the sword is my heart. Where the heart goes, the sword goes. The faster the heart, the faster the sword. The further the heart, the further the sword. Chu Mu felt that there were no more shackles in the state of the heart. Even if it was the pinnacle of the state of the heart, it was just an enhancement of his current comprehension. In an instant, Chu Mu felt the red energy wreaking havoc in his body. He felt his organs being destroyed, and he felt his bones being broken. Then, his sword energy moved. Carrying the power of true intent, it shattered the energy wreaking havoc in his body. The saint body's powerful self-healing ability combined with the vigorous vitality in his heart began to repair his injured body. In the outside world, everything within 3 meters of him could be clearly sensed by him. This kind of sensing was not done with the power of the soul, nor was it a sixth sense. It was a very mysterious way of sensing. It was the power of the heart of the sword. It was the mystery and mystery of the heart of the sword. Evil dragon Lin Zhentong attacked again. Chu Mu's eyes became calm. His aura also gradually calmed down. It was as if a stormy sea had suddenly calmed down, but there was an unfathomable feeling to it. He attacked. The speed of the two swords was not fast. It looked like it was just a direct attack. There was nothing mysterious about it. However, Lin Zhentong felt that his claws had been cut off. Yes, the trajectory of his attack seemed to have been grasped and then cut off. Then, a sword light enlarged in front of his eyes. He quickly dodged, but he was still stabbed in the chest. This was the first time he had been attacked by Chu Mu's sword since he had transformed into the evil dragon. Although the sword had only left a mark on his scales and did not cause him any harm, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Coincidence, it must be a coincidence, Lin Zhentong said. His claws, his legs, his tail, and even his mouth had all become sharp weapons for killing. They all contained terrifying power. When linked together, it was as if he had become a world-shaking martial arts grandmaster. They were perfectly linked together. If it had been before, Chu Mu would not have been able to block Lin Zhentong's attack. But now. Chapter 1804. Lin Zhentong's speed was still incomparably fast, like red lightning, but Chu Mu was no longer powerless to fight back. Heart and sword as one, using the heart to control the sword, the area within 3 meters seemed to have become a unique domain. Everything was under his control. Wherever the heart went, the sword would go. It transcended the limits of time and space, transcending distance. Under the combination of the heart and sword as one, the realm of silence, the sword of will, and so on, the attack trajectory of Lin Zhentong's claws and tail began to appear more clearly in Chu Mu's perception. The two swords seemed to be everywhere. No matter how fast and ferocious Lin Zhentong's attacks were, Chu Mu's two swords could intercept them in advance. That kind of feeling was like holding back for a long time and was about to relieve himself, but was interrupted just as he was about to start. It was very uncomfortable and very sullen. Chu Mu's expression was indifferent. His eyes were calm, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in the courtyard. His previous appearance of being beaten passively was completely different. Before and after comprehending it, it was completely different. In terms of absolute strength, perhaps there was not much improvement, or even no improvement. But in terms of realm, it directly increased by more than one level, and so did his fighting ability. Holding a sword in each hand, under the control of the sword, there was a kind of feeling that it was not the hands that were controlling the sword, but the heart, the will, and the mind. The hands were just the appearance. The faster the heart, the faster the sword. The speed of the sword was above the speed of the sword in both hands. In one breath, the sword appeared here, and in the next breath, the sword appeared there again. It seemed as if there were countless swords attacking at the same time, but there were only two swords waving. That kind of wonder was incomprehensible. Even if Lin Jintong's swordsmanship had reached the limit of the man and sword as one, he still could not understand the swordsmanship realm that Chu Mu displayed at this time. Under the superb swordsmanship realm, the gap between the two was evened out, caught up, and even surpassed. The sword in the chest, the sword in the arm, and the sword in the thigh. The sword that came and went like a ghost, and the sword that had a clear trajectory but was impossible to guard against, gradually made Lin Jintong feel tired of dealing with it. Lin Jintong could only rely on his hard scales to resist Chu Mu's sword and Chu Mu's attacks. The sword light flashed like the refraction of sunlight. Lin Jintong subconsciously closed his eyes, not daring to look directly at it. When he opened his eyes, the sword light split into two and pierced straight at him. His eyes hurt as if they were about to be pierced through. He quickly closed his eyes again, using his tough eyelids to block Chu Mu's sword. With a clang, Lin Jintong's eyelids blocked Chu Mu's sword, only leaving behind a white mark. However, there was still a surge of energy that passed through his eyelids and struck his eyes. The excruciating pain made Lin Jintong's entire body tremble. He let out a wild roar as if his eyes had been pierced directly into his brain. It was incomparably painful. His chaotic and berserk consciousness suddenly became ferocious, almost breaking through Lin Jintong's will suppression. Tears unconsciously flowed out from the corners of his eyes. He covered his eyes with his claws and curled up his body, doing his best to protect himself. He swung out his tail, quickly moving in front of him to set up a defense. Although his scale's defensive power was shocking, and even his eyelids were the same, his eyes were still a relatively weak part. Under the impact of the energy, it was already very good that they hadn't been damaged. Chu Mu wouldn't show any mercy. His two swords continuously attacked from every angle and every part of Lin Jintong's body. He was looking for a weakness. Nothing was perfect. The only reason it was called perfect was because there were too few weaknesses, and they were difficult to find. Lin Jintong's defense under the evil dragon transformation was too strong. Even Chu Mu's two swords, which were 10 times stronger, couldn't directly pierce through him. Lin Jintong's movement speed was also extremely fast. It was extremely difficult to continuously attack the same spot. Even if he could do it, there would be a certain amount of time between each attack. In just a little bit of time, the wound would have already healed. Chu Mu had just begun to comprehend the essence of the sword in the heart realm. The heart and sword as one could only cover a range of 3 meters. Although it was said that the faster the heart, the faster the sword would be. That was a theory with no upper limit. Right now, Chu Mu was only at the beginning. Under such circumstances, it was already very shocking for him to be able to reverse the situation and continuously counterattack Lin Jintong. Sword, 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 sword. He continuously attacked, looking for a weak point on Lin Jintong's body, cutting off his counterattack. At the same time, Chu Mu also began to think. Having a sword in one's heart is the realm of swordsmanship. Having the heart and sword as one is the quintessence. These are not direct swordsmanship, so they don't have much power when used. Only when they are combined with swordsmanship can the profoundness be displayed and the power of swordsmanship be increased. But right now, I can only integrate the heart and sword as one into the basic swordsmanship. Basic swordsmanship was the foundation of swordsmanship. It was the foundation, and it was very important. However, the foundation was the end. No matter how far one cultivated it, it was still the foundation. The existence of basic swordsmanship was originally for people to practice and familiarize themselves with swordsmanship, not for killing or destroying. Therefore, in terms of power, there was nothing special about it. Except for the basic swordsmanship, Chu Mu had already given up on practicing other swordsmanship. Therefore, he hadn't reached the stage where he could integrate the heart and sword as one. As for the swordsmanship that he created and was most familiar with, it was indeed very powerful. However, the more powerful a swordsmanship was, the more difficult it was to integrate the essence of the heart and sword as one. If he wanted to use the swordsmanship, he had to give up on the heart and sword as one. This was a difficult choice to make. According to the current situation, only by maintaining the heart and sword as one state could he contend against Lin Jintong and even gain a slight advantage. In a breath's time, both swords struck out more than 100 times, but they couldn't break through Lin Jintong's scales. It was as if there was no weakness other than his eyes. Lin Jintong had also strengthened the protection of his eyes, making it harder for Chu Mu to hit him. Since I can't find any flaws, I'll just have to wear him out. Chu Mu thought to himself. He didn't believe that Lin Jintong could maintain the evil dragon transformation until the time limit was up. Sword God's descent had also consumed a lot of energy, sword energy and physique. This was a battle of attrition. It was a battle of attrition to see who could last longer. Lin Jintong could also see it. He couldn't escape because if he did, his only son, Lin Ziki, would be in danger. Another quarter of an hour passed, and both of them had consumed a lot of energy. Lin Jintong's expression suddenly changed, and he hurriedly sent a sound transmission to Lin Ziki. Leave first, go to the nest we came from and wait for me there. Lin Ziki's expression greatly changed. Ever since Lin Jintong had started attacking Chu Mu, he had felt his heart go up and down, wavering between excitement and hesitation. Seeing Chu Mu, for some unknown reason, go from passively taking a beating to gaining the upper hand, constantly attacking with his sword, and his father seemingly being suppressed, even sending a message over telling him to leave first, Lin Ziki further realized that the situation wasn't good. Father, be careful. After sending a sound transmission, Lin Ziki turned around and left at full speed. He knew that his strength wasn't strong enough. If he rushed up, Chu Mu would probably be able to end his life with a single strike. If he stayed, it was very likely that his father would have worries. Since that was the case, he might as well leave and let his father give it his all. He believed that his father would be able to kill Chu Mu in the end. As soon as Lin Ziki left, Lin Jintong felt relieved. His worries were gone, and he fought Chu Mu with all his strength. 60 breaths later, a light flickered on Lin Jintong's body, and the scales on his body began to distort and blur. The evil dragon transformation's duration was about to end. Lin Jintong erupted with all his strength and attacked in an instant. He wanted to force Chu Mu back and leave before the evil dragon transformation's duration ended. As for the consequences, they weren't important. Surviving was the most important thing. However, when Chu Mu saw Lin Jintong's scales begin to blur, he knew that the evil dragon transformation's duration was about to end. How could he let him escape? He attacked with both swords, intercepting Lin Jintong's attack and cutting off his path of retreat. Stop, or I'll explode and take you down with me. Lin Jintong's voice was incomparably hoarse, like two pieces of rusty iron rubbing against each other. His tone was fierce and ruthless as he threatened Chu Mu. You can try. Chu Mu wasn't afraid of the threat. The red light on Lin Jintong's body became increasingly blurry. Soon, the red light receded, and a sword emerged from the top of his head. It was the evil dragon sword. When the evil dragon sword left his body, it meant that the evil dragon transformation's duration was up. Lin Jintong's face was pale, and he looked dispirited. His powerful aura receded like the tide, and it was less than 1/10 of its original strength. The red evil dragon patterns on the evil dragon sword were also faintly discernible. This was the price of using the evil dragon transformation. Lin Jintong's remaining strength was quickly mobilized, flowing through his meridians and into his dantian, then rushing up to his yuan spirit. Lin Jintong wanted to self-detonate his yuan spirit and body to take Chu Mu down with him. Only then could he ensure the safety of his only son, Lin Ziki. With his strength, even if it was less than 1/10 of its original strength, once he self-detonated, the power would be terrifying. If Chu Mu was hit at such a close distance, there was an 80 to 90% chance that his body would be smashed to pieces. Chu Mu was already prepared for this. He unsheathed his sword. The two swords pierced into Lin Jintong's body. One of the swords cut off the last of the sword origin, while the other pierced through Lin Jintong's yuan spirit and shattered his consciousness. You! Lin Jintong only had time to say one last word after failing to self-detonate and being killed. He was filled with unwillingness and regret. The light in his eyes dimmed, and all signs of life were gone. Sheathing his swords, Chu Mu let out a sigh of relief. This battle was incomparably difficult, but in the end, he won. Moreover, he had comprehended the essence of the sword in the heart, and the heart and sword as one. It could be said that he had gained a lot. However, the power of the sword god's descent's secret art had been exhausted once again. His sword origin was almost depleted, and his physique was more than 90% exhausted. His spiritual energy was less than 10%. In short, his strength had been greatly reduced. Even though he knew that Lin Ziki had escaped, he didn't chase after him. More importantly, he needed to recover his various strengths first. Chapter 1805. Lin Ziki's expression suddenly changed. He felt a sharp pain in his heart, as if it had been pierced by an invisible sword. Father! He stopped and looked back. His expression changed greatly, his eyes filled with shock and fear. He shook his head fiercely as if comforting himself. No, it can't be. Father is so powerful. Even if I can't kill Chu Mu, I can't be killed. It can't be, it definitely can't be. Unknowingly, tears filled Lin Ziki's eyes. He turned around again, heading in the direction of the so-called demon nest. He was going to wait for his father there. Uneasiness gnawed at his soul like a demon. Fear assaulted him. There are still 4 more days. I need to raise my cultivation as soon as possible. Chu Mu stood up. Several hours later, with the assistance of pills, he had finally recovered his cultivation of sword origin. His physical strength had naturally recovered as well. Only a small portion of the strength of his soul had recovered, but it was no longer enough to hinder him in battle. In these few hours, no demons had appeared, allowing Chu Mu to properly recover his strength. After comprehending the essence of the sword in the heart realm, Chu Mu's perception had increased quite a bit even if he didn't use it. Lin Jintong's corpse lay to the side. His eyes were dull, but one could still see the unwillingness and regret in them. His sword was a spiritual sword. It was very valuable. His spatial ring would probably contain quite a bit of wealth. After all, he was the second palace master of the Evil Dragon Hall, and he was also a Dark Star Sword Saint. After a brief inspection, Chu Mu made a pleasantly surprised discovery. Apart from the hearts of sinners, Chu Mu didn't care about the other things. What truly surprised him was the essence of heaven and earth. It was a ball of water essence. The second layer of the sword god's descent secret technique required the essence of the 5 elements and the essences of wind, ice, and thunder. He needed 8 in total. Currently, Chu Mu had the essence of wood, metal, thunder, and water. For as long as he gathered 4 more, the second layer of the Sword God's Descent secret technique would be just around the corner. It seems like I'll have to pay attention to the various essences of heaven and earth in the land of exile, Chu Mu thought to himself. He continued to move forward, searching for the ominous demons to kill. Sword technique. I need to practice a few sword techniques first. Chu Mu thought as he hurried along. In the past, he would never have had such thoughts, because compared to the few sword moves he had created, the power of those sword moves could not be compared to those sword moves. The difference was huge. Now, in order to integrate the heart and sword as one into his self-created sword move as soon as possible, Chu Mu had no choice but to practice swordsmanship. To put it simply, the current heart and sword as one could only be integrated with basic sword technique. After all, basic sword techniques were of the lowest level and had the weakest power. Moreover, Chu Mu had been immersed in basic sword techniques for hundreds of years. With his talent and comprehension, he had practiced basic sword techniques countless times. It had long been ingrained in his bones and soul. It was more instinctive than instinct. On the other hand, sword moves such as the cloud-piercing sword technique were many times more powerful than basic sword technique. Their level was also much higher than basic sword technique. In short, the difference between self-created sword techniques and basic sword techniques was equivalent to the difference between extremely high and extremely low level. There was a gap of more than several levels in between. If Chu Mu wanted to integrate the heart and sword as one into his self-created sword technique, it would be extremely difficult. However, if he used other sword techniques as a bridge and improved them step by step before finally integrating them into his self-created sword technique, the difficulty would be reduced by at least half. This was an idea. Chu Mu began to deduce. It's feasible. After the deduction, he made a decision. However, he still needed to choose the sword technique he wanted to cultivate. He could not cultivate it carelessly. This sword technique was usually created on the basis of the power of heaven and earth. However, Chu Mu had given up on the power of heaven and earth and was using sword intent to control the sword. Therefore, it would be best if the sword technique he chose was more compatible with the sword intent that he had mastered. The so-called compatibility meant that Chu Mu could better modify it, remove the application of the power of heaven and earth, and change it into sword intent. The sword intent of stabbing, sword intent of slashing, sword intent of shaking, and so on. The choice of sword technique should be based on stabbing, slashing, shaking, and so on. As he moved forward, he turned his brain, thinking and searching. There were many sword techniques in Chu Mu's memory. It could be said that in terms of the number of sword techniques he had memorized, there were few who could compare with him. It was difficult to find a few that were more suitable among so many sword techniques. Fortunately, Chu Mu could multitask, so he could search while moving forward. When he found a group of ferocious demons, Chu Mu did not need to concentrate. He could kill them with his sword. The other half of his mind was still searching for a suitable sword technique. After checking one sword technique after another, Chu Mu roughly understood the essence of the sword technique with just a glance. After all, with his current level of sword technique, unless it was an inherited level sword technique, he could see through sword techniques below the inherited level at a glance. Ordinary inherited level sword techniques would only take him a little more time. One day later, Chu Mu successfully decided on the first sword technique that he wanted to cultivate. This sword technique was called the 13 Meteor Strike. According to the classification of sword techniques in the land of exiles, it was a second-rate sword technique. The 13 meteor strikes had a total of 13 swords. Each sword was faster and faster than the previous one. The technique of using the sword was to stab. Each sword stab was like a meteor streaking across the sky. This sword technique was simple and direct. It would be easier for Chu Mu to modify the power of precepts into sword intent. After choosing the first sword technique, Chu Mu temporarily gave up on searching for the second one. Instead, he analyzed the 13 meteor strike. He analyzed the essence of the sword technique in depth and simulated and modified it. After some results, he would try to use the sword in actual combat. Modifying a sword technique was not an easy task. Even if Chu Mu's sword technique was at an extremely high level, he still needed to spend a considerable amount of time and energy. Time passed. There was only one day left before the Black God's secret realm closed. Chu Mu's figure wandered among a dozen silver-horned ferocious demons. With the blazing glory spiritual sword in hand, Chu Mu struck. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky and falling down. After more than 2 days of analysis and modification, Chu Mu finally succeeded in incorporating sword intent into the sword technique and replacing the power of precepts. Under the control of the sword intent and stab intent, the 13 meteor strikes was slightly different from the original. It was sharper. 1 sword, 2 swords, 3 swords. 3 meteor-like sword light pierced through 3 silver-horned ferocious demons in a flash, breaking their core and absorbing their core power. Of the 13 swords of the 13 meteor strikes, the first sword was the slowest and the weakest, the second sword was slightly stronger, and so on. The speed of the 13th sword was twice as fast as the first sword, and the power contained in it was also twice as strong as the first sword. Combined, the power of the 13th sword was 3 times stronger than the first sword. Naturally, the first sword was the easiest to master. The 13th sword was the strongest, but also the most difficult to master. With a flick of his wrist, the sword light turned into meteors and pierced through the sky. His figure wandered like a wisp of smoke. The attacks of the silver-horned ferocious demons could not touch Chu Mu at all. After the battle with Lin Jintong, although there was no improvement in his cultivation and strength, there was no increase in his fighting style. His fighting skills were also more refined. Otherwise, it would not have been so easy to fight a dozen silver-horned ferocious demons. Not long after, the dozen silver-horned ferocious demons were all killed by Chu Mu's 13 meteor strike. The power of the core surged into his body, strengthening his sword origin. He was 1 step closer to the mid-stage 8th sky of the Wangu realm. I wonder if I can reach the mid-stage before the Black God's secret realm closes? Chu Mu thought to himself. The higher one's cultivation, the harder it was to raise it. At this stage, the copper-horned ferocious demon's core power would be weakened. The iron-horned ferocious demon's core power could not even be replenished by the sword origin. Only the silver-horned ferocious demon's core power had an obvious effect. However, the silver-horned ferocious demon was a high-level existence in the secret realm. Their numbers could not be compared to the iron-horned ferocious demon, and they were also rarer than the copper-horned ferocious demon. There was not much time left. Chu Mu quickened his pace and searched for the silver-horned ferocious demon. He did not know if it was due to luck, but other than the first demon nest, he did not see a second one. Otherwise, he would have killed at least a dozen silver-horned ferocious demons' nest. It was enough to push his cultivation to the mid-stage 8th sky of the Wangu realm. At that time, he would be even stronger than a dark star sword saint. He did not find any demon nests, nor did he see Lin Ziki. As he searched for the silver-horned ferocious demon, he pondered over the 13 meteor strikes. The 13 meteor strikes was not complicated. It was just a simple stab. It was easy to grasp, but difficult to grasp the essence. However, it was nothing to Chu Mu. After a few battles, he had already grasped the essence of the 13 meteor strike. He was trying to merge the heart and sword as one into it. "Are you Brother Chu?" A voice sounded. Chu Mu turned around and saw a black figure rapidly approaching him. "Oh, it's Brother Zhao. Brother Zhao's cultivation has improved a lot in the secret realm." Chu Mu smiled. This person was Zhao Wuji. When Zhao Wuji entered the Black God's secret realm, his cultivation was at the peak of the 7th sky of the Wangu realm. Now, he was at the peak of the 8th sky of the Wangu realm. When he was at the peak of the 7th sky of the Wangu realm, his strength was comparable to an ordinary 9-star saint. Now that he was at the peak of the 8th sky of the Wangu realm, his strength had improved tremendously. He would not be any weaker than a dark star sword saint, and he might even be comparable to an expert like Lin Jintong. In other words, there was an 80 to 90% chance that someone like Zhao Wuji, who was second only to the 7-star realm, would become a bright moon expert. Brother Chu's cultivation has improved more than mine. Zhao Wuji smiled. When Chu Mu entered, he was at the early stage of the 7th sky of the Wangu realm. Now, he was at the early stage of the 8th sky of the Wangu realm. When Zhao Wuji first saw Chu Mu, battle intent flashed in his eyes. However, when he saw Chu Mu's cultivation, the battle intent disappeared. Chapter 1806. The huge black whirlpool was like a hole in the sky. As it spun, it contained a terrifying destructive power that could destroy the void. That was the entrance to the Black God's secret realm. Now, there was no need for anyone to guard it. Once the time passed, no one could enter again. Even if the 7 kings tried to enter, they would immediately be attacked by the destructive power and die. There were many people gathered below. The people from the 5 city lords' manors, as well as those who were second only to the 5 city lords' manors. They were all waiting. A month's time was nothing to any saint. It was a very short period of time. Wu Yuzi raised her head and stared at the black whirlpool. She said in a low voice only she could hear, "Second brother really dotes on Ziki too much." However, with second brother's help, Ziki's cultivation might be able to reach the Aeon 9th celestial layer and become another expert of the evil dragon palace. With Lin Ziki's talent, once she reached the Aeon 9th celestial layer, she would be able to cultivate the evil dragon palace's secret techniques and sword technique. Her strength would definitely increase rapidly, surpassing the peak of the 9-star saint realm. As long as her cultivation continued to increase, she would have a chance to become the evil dragon palace's new dark star sword saint. The decisive power of a large force was the experts of the 3 major ranks. However, there were too few of them. Not all geniuses had the possibility of reaching the 3 major ranks. If the evil dragon palace could have one more dark star expert, their high-end battle strength would increase again. It's about time to close. Wu Yuzi thought to herself. She was somewhat expectant. She didn't know if the people from the evil dragon palace who entered the Black God's secret realm would be able to come out alive. It was very important to come out alive. As long as they could come out alive, their cultivation would more or less increase. An hour later, the rotation of the black vortex suddenly sped up. At the center, there was a bit of blackness spreading out like a drop of ink in clear water. It quickly spread out, and a strong storm quickly blew out from it. Whistling sounds rang out everywhere. Not long after, small black dots appeared and fell from the sky. Those were human figures. They're out. I wonder how many of them are still alive. The Black Mystic Realm was not a place to enjoy life. It was the territory of the Mystic Realm's ominous demons. The Mystic Realm's ominous demons were extremely ferocious. If one wanted to hunt them down, they would have to bear the risk of being killed by them. Death was inevitable. One figure after another appeared and landed. Without the influence of the spatial crack, everyone landed naturally without any damage. Their bodies all gave off powerful auras, and they were like a storm that swept out in all directions. This was because their cultivations had clearly increased, but because they did not have enough time, they had not fully grasped their cultivation. After these people left the Black God's secret realm, they quickly spread out and entered their own camp. There were a total of 10 people who entered the 5 city lord mansions, including their respective young lords, but only 5 or 6 of them came out alive. The death rate could be said to be half. The other forces had 8, 6, 4, 2, and so on. The mortality rate was also about half. According to the final statistics, the death rate was close to half. Most of the people who had died had their primordial spirits turned into nutrients for the beast. Those who had survived had their cultivation base increased by a small level. Of course, those who had increased their cultivation base by a small level were at the peak of the 8th or 9th level of the immemorial realm. The higher one's cultivation base was, the more energy they needed to increase their cultivation base. Quick, look at Tu Qianjun. I remember that he was at the peak of the 7th level of the immemorial realm before entering the Black God secret realm. Now, he's at the late 8th level of the immemorial realm. There's nothing strange about it. Look at Bai Chen, he was at the peak of the 7th level of the immemorial realm before entering. Now, he's at the peak of the 8th level of the immemorial realm. Other than Tu Qianjun, the other stars' cultivation base increased by a large level. They're at the peak of the 8th level of the immemorial realm. No, you're wrong. The 7th star, Peerless Sword Star, Chu Mu's cultivation base increased from the early 7th level of the immemorial realm to the early 8th level of the immemorial realm. Oh, he's close to the middle level of the immemorial realm. All sorts of discussions rang out incessantly. In the end, after a simple calculation, the increase in cultivation base was at most one realm, and the decrease was at least one small realm. It's a pity that I'm so close. I just need to absorb the core energy of the silver horn fierce demon to reach the middle level of the immemorial realm. Chu Mu thought to himself. He was so close. He had already seen 2 silver horn fierce demons. Just as he was about to slash them with his sword, he found himself unable to move. He was forcefully sent out by the power of the Black God's secret realm. In other words, Chu Mu's cultivation base was at the early 8th level of the immemorial realm. He was very close to the middle level of the immemorial realm, but it would take him a few months or even half a year to reach the middle level of the immemorial realm. No matter how helpless Chu Mu was, he could only accept the fact. Thinking back, it was a huge leap for him to reach the middle level of the immemorial realm from the early 7th level of the immemorial realm in a month. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for those who were qualified to enter the Black God's secret realm. There's less than 19 years left. Chu Mu thought to himself. His gaze swept through the crowd and was immediately stunned. His pupils instantly contracted to the size of needles and locked onto a person not far away. His eyes were full of disbelief and disbelief. Feng Wui. He saw Feng Wui. How is this possible? A low voice that only he could hear was heard. He couldn't believe it. Chu Mu was very clear that in the Black God's secret realm's demon nest, Feng Wui had been directly hit by his Heaven's Might sword style. His head had been shattered, his body had been destroyed, and his consciousness had been destroyed by his true intent. Even if his primordial spirit hadn't been directly destroyed, it was on the verge of collapse. In that situation, Feng Wui was 100% dead. Chu Mu was sure that Feng Wui was dead when he escaped from the encirclement of the silver horn fierce demons. Dead, he was definitely dead. How could he be alive and kicking here? Feeling Chu Mu's gaze, Feng Wui instantly turned around and cracked a smile. His teeth were eerily white and his eyes were deep. That smile had an indescribable strangeness to it. It was as if he had caught a glimpse of it. Feng Wui quickly turned around and used his movement technique. He transformed into a stream of light and quickly left. His speed far surpassed a normal peak 9-star saint rank. When Feng Wui was killed by Chu Mu, his cultivation base had already reached the 8th heavenly layer of the Wangu realm. His strength was much stronger than an ordinary peak 9-star saint. Now that his cultivation base had reached the peak of the 8th heavenly layer of the Wangu realm, he was much stronger. Moreover, he had cultivated the Thunder Hibernation sword art and was extremely fast. Staring at Feng Wui's rapidly departing figure, Chu Mu's brows slightly creased. There was a strange feeling lingering in his heart that he couldn't explain. It seemed to be a type of uneasiness, but this uneasiness didn't seem to be directed at him. What's going on? No matter how Chu Mu thought about it, he would never have thought that Feng Wui had died long ago. Now, a demon lord had used the demon lord reincarnation technique to take over Feng Wui's body and enter the land of exile. The appearance of a human and the nature of a demon lord. Who knew what kind of storm it would cause in the land of exile? Unable to figure it out, Chu Mu gave up for now. On the evil dragon palace's side, the third palace master Wu Yuzi's gaze swept across the crowd and landed on Lin Ziqi's face. The evil dragon palace was a powerful force second only to the city lord palace. Therefore, they had 8 quotas to enter. Including Lin Zhentong, there were 9. But now, only 4 had come out. Ziqi, what's wrong with you? Where's your father? Wu Yuzi frowned and asked when he saw Lin Ziqi's dazed expression. It was as if she was looking for something. Where's my father? Where's my father? Lin Ziqi repeated. She grabbed Wu Yuzi's arm tightly as if she was clutching at a life-saving straw. Your father entered the Black God's secret realm with you to protect you. Are you two not together? Wu Yuzi asked in a low voice. Entering the Black God's secret realm, one would be randomly separated. Therefore, in order to be placed together, Lin Zhentong had spent a lot of effort to obtain a treasure. Could it be that the treasure was ineffective? My father didn't come out. My father is dead. Lin Ziqi muttered to herself in a daze. Wu Yuzi was enraged. She slapped Lin Ziqi, waking him up. The 3 palace masters of the evil dragon palace had always called each other brothers. Their relationship was pretty good. Combined with their strength, even 10 Lin Ziqis couldn't compare to 1 Lin Zhentong. Speak, what's going on? Wu Yuzi was furious. It's him, third uncle. He's the one who killed my father. Lin Ziqi woke up at this time. She turned her gaze and looked at Chu Mu's face. Incomparable hatred shone in her eyes as she pointed at Chu Mu and shouted. Evil Dragon Secret Guards, Evil Dragon Saint Slaughtering Formation. Wu Yuzi ignored everything and directly ordered. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Numerous figures moved at high speed, turning into afterimages. They quickly appeared around Chu Mu, forming a circle. There were a total of 9 people. Every one of them had a cultivation at the peak of the 9-star saint level. The positions where the 9 people stood gave Chu Mu a strange feeling. The auras of the 9 people seemed to be resonating and rising rapidly. Chu Mu knew that this was a kind of battle formation. A battle formation formed by 9 peak 9-star saint level experts. Even if it was a relatively ordinary battle formation, it still possessed terrifying power. Without any hesitation, Chu Mu turned into a streak of light, tearing through the sky and escaping from the battle formation that was about to be completed. He turned around and drew his sword light. The sharp sword light was like a meteor streaking across the sky, breaking the bright moon. At the same time, the evil dragon saint slaughtering formation was completed. Under the resonance of the auras, a black evil dragon condensed in the air. It clawed at one of Chu Mu's sword light and shattered it. With a swing of its tail, it smashed towards Chu Mu with a terrifying might that seemed like a 10,000-year-old volcano erupting. Chapter 1807. A sharp explosion sounded, as if the sky was being torn apart. The thick black evil dragon tail smashed towards Chu Mu with an earth-shattering momentum, wanting to smash Chu Mu into pieces. The power caused everyone's expression to change greatly. The evil dragon saint slaughtering array formed by 9 ordinary 9-star saint-level experts was already comparable to a dark star sword saint. The strength of a dark star sword saint was deeply ingrained in everyone's hearts. Those were 3 great powers that were above the saint level. Even if they were the weakest of the 3, they were still existences that countless people looked up to. At the same time, Wu Yuzi also attacked. As the 3rd palace master of the evil dragon palace, Wu Yuzi's strength was also at the dark star sword saint level. He was only slightly weaker than Lin Zhentong. He was different from Lin Zhentong. Lin Zhentong was more proficient in fighting, while he was more proficient in battle formations. Therefore, when Wu Yuzi attacked, it was the best opportunity for the evil dragon Saint slaughtering formation created by the 9-peak 9-star Saint rank experts to unleash its power to attack Chu Mu. The sword turned into an evil dragon. Its sharp claws reached out from the void and slashed down. The void under the claws exploded. Lin Jintong's evil dragon sword art was direct, overbearing and filled with darkness. However, Wu Yuzi's evil dragon sword art was different. The black evil dragon was faintly discernible, as if it was shrouded in clouds and mist. Only the claw it extended was incomparably fast and sharp. The same sword technique would have different interpretations under different expert swords. This was directly related to a person's personality, temperament, habits, as well as the strength they comprehended. Wu Yuzi's timing was impeccable. It was almost perfect with the evil dragon holy slaughtering formation. Facing such an attack, even a true dark star expert would find it difficult to dodge. They could only take it head-on. Chu Mu was known as the 7th star, the unparalleled sword star. His cultivation had reached the early 8th sky of the immemorial realm, infinitely close to the middle stage. His strength was definitely stronger than ordinary 9-star saint. However, many people didn't believe that he could rival a dark star expert. The gazes of Bai Chen and the others sharpened. With their own imaginations, even they would find it difficult to deal with such an attack. How would Chu Mu deal with it? The attack of the evil dragon's giant tail and the attack of the evil dragon's claw came one after the other. The space around them was sealed and imprisoned under the immense pressure. Everyone's eyes widened. In an instant that only a few people could see, Chu Mu's figure twisted strangely, as if he was refracting light. The attack of the evil dragon holy slaughtering formation and Wu Yuzi's sword, which had grasped the opportunity, both missed. It felt as if Chu Mu didn't exist, but he was clearly standing there, as if he had never moved. What terrifying self-control! The pupils of the 5 bright moon sword saints shrunk, and they were shocked. Only the 5 of them could see it clearly. At the moment when he was attacked, Chu Mu's body twisted at an indescribable speed, and he did something that went against the human body. It was as if he didn't have any bones. In that instant, not only did he dodge the attack of the evil dragon holy slaughtering formation, but he also dodged Wu Yuzi's sword. Those who could see it were shocked, and those who couldn't were also shocked. Chu Mu held a sword in each hand, and the sword light was fierce, sharp, and domineering. The speed of the sword was shocking, and it turned into a meteor that shot through the sky. It was as if it had broken through the bright moon, and it shot towards the evil dragon holy slaughtering formation and Wu Yuzi. This was the second-rate sword technique that Chu Mu cultivated, 13 meteor strikes. There were a total of 26 sword light, and they looked like 26 meteors that streaked across the sky. They contained terrifying power, and under the guidance of the sword intent and the piercing intent, they were extremely sharp. Wu Yuzi's face changed drastically, and she hastily retreated. She waved her sword, and laid down layers of defense. Each sword light was like a small evil dragon that was swimming around, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The evil dragon of the evil dragon holy slaughtering formation was rolling around, and it was as if it was summoning clouds and rain. Layers of ripples were created, and each ripple contained shocking defensive power. Soon after, both of its claws stretched out, and its sharp claws filled the void, covering all directions. Even if it was a second-rate sword technique, Chu Mu's supreme sword technique could still erupt with terrifying power. Holding his sword, he twisted his body, and like a swimming dragon, he closed in on Wu Yuzi. The 13 meteor-like sword light were all blocked and shattered by Wu Yuzi. At the same time, Chu Mu attacked again, and in the blink of an eye, another 13 meteor-like sword light appeared, and each of them seemed to be faster and sharper than the previous ones. In terms of strength, Wu Yuzi was slightly inferior to Lin Jintong, and Chu Mu's current strength was even more tyrannical than when he fought Lin Jintong. Facing Chu Mu, Wu Yuzi couldn't gain the upper hand, and was directly suppressed. She retreated, and continuously waved her sword to defend, and shattered the sword light. Chu Mu advanced, attacked, and waved his sword. The 13 meteor strikes were brazenly launched again and again. Every strike, every sword, every display, Chu Mu put his heart and soul into it. The true intent, essence, and trajectory were all grasped and revealed. Although it was only a second-rate sword technique, Chu Mu didn't look down on it, and treated it with his sincere heart towards the sword Dao. Pure and sincere. Facing Chu Mu's attack, Wu Yuzi couldn't find any opportunity to counterattack, and could only block and retreat. The evil dragon formed by the evil dragon saint slaughtering array, under the high-speed movement of the 9-9-star saint experts, quickly leaped into the air and rushed towards Chu Mu. It opened its mouth and let out a shocking roar. A terrifying sound wave shattered the sky and rushed towards Chu Mu. 13 sword lights seemed to appear at the same time. The first one was the most subtle, and the 13th one was the strongest, representing the 13 meteor strike. Collision, shattering, and raging power. So strong. This Chu Mu actually has the strength of a dark star expert. As expected of the unparalleled sword star, too shocking. I think it's more than that. Right now, it's like he's facing 2 dark star experts at the same time, and he still has the upper hand. The people sent by the evil dragon palace this time were those who could enter the Black God's secret realm, Wu Yuzi, and the 9 evil dragon secret guards. 5 of them had died in the secret realm, and 4 had come out alive. However, the strongest among them was only equivalent to an ordinary 9-star saint expert. They couldn't interfere in a battle of this level. Wu Yuzi was almost suppressed, and the evil dragon saint's slaughtering array kept chasing, but was blocked time and time again. The situation wasn't good. 13 sword light like meteors attacked again. This time, it wasn't straight but straight and curved, and they all hit the same spot. This made Wu Yuzi's expression turn even uglier, and she was even more shocked in her heart. Although the original 13 sword light seemed to attack at the same time, they were actually attacking 13 different spots. Now, the 13 sword light was hitting the same spot, which meant that the same spot had to withstand 13 attacks. Chu Mu's attainment in the 13 meteor strikes was even deeper. The afterimages of the sword energies shattered under the attacks of the evil dragon saint's slaughtering array, and Chu Mu's real body appeared on the side, as if he had teleported. His eyes were shining like bright stars. He slowly raised the sword in his hand, and a patch of darkness seemed to appear behind him. It turned into the void of the night, and it instantly calmed people down. The 5 bright moon sword saints widened their eyes, and they couldn't hide the shock in their hearts. This sword phenomenon was clearly a sign that Yi Shiwen's attainment in sword arts had reached an extremely high level, and he had completely comprehended and mastered the sword arts. After that, he had improved the sword arts to become 100% compatible with him, and then created a unique phenomenon. That was something that many strong cultivators couldn't do. Even the 5 of them had only managed to do it after thousands of years. As for Bai Chen and the other monstrous geniuses, even though they were extremely talented and would be able to do it sooner or later, they were still far from it. Just this point alone confirmed Chu Mu's title as the unparalleled sword star. In fact, Chu Mu had surpassed the level of the 6 stars, and he was on the same level as them. Star-rank monstrous geniuses indeed had a bright future. However, in their eyes, Yi Shiwen was only a junior. One day, Yi Shiwen would have strength that could rival or even surpass them. However, it would take at least a few decades. The phenomenon in the night sky also made Chu Mu's opponent, Wu Yuzi, and the evil dragon saint slaughtering array pause for a moment. Their minds were affected to a certain extent. Then, Chu Mu's hand that was holding the sword moved, and the first streak of light appeared in the night sky behind him. It was the light of a meteor. Although it looked weak, it streaked across the night sky. The first streak, the second streak, the third streak, the fourth streak in the blink of an eye, streaks of meteor light that were brighter than the last streaked across the night sky. There were a total of 13 streaks of meteor light, and they seemed to have come from afar. They closed in on Chu-Mu and aimed at Chu-Mu's body. In the next breath, Chu-Mu's body was about to be hit and shattered. However, the moment he stabbed out with his sword, the sword light disappeared directly. The 13 streaks of meteor light also merged into one in an instant, turning into a beam of light that was several times brighter than before. It was faster and sharper. The 14th strike. A low voice rang out from Chu-Mu's mouth. He stabbed out with his sword, and it merged with the bright starlight behind him. It streaked across the sky, and with the heart and sword as one, there was nothing that it could not reach within 3 meters. Wherever the heart went, the sword would follow. This sword was too fast. The level of the sword technique had also leaped to the level of a first-class sword technique. Under Chu-Mu's power, it released an unparalleled sharpness. It pierced through the void at a speed that was countless times faster than the speed of sound. On Wu Yuzi's face there was still a look of shock. It was simply too late for him to block. The sword light penetrated his glabella, pierced his primordial spirit, and tore it apart, strangled it, and destroyed it. The strange phenomenon in the dark night sky disappeared. Wu Yuzi stood where he was with his sword in his hand. His eyes were lifeless, and there was only a slight wound between his eyebrows. The vitality in his body had disappeared without him noticing. Third uncle. Lin Ziki was dumbfounded. He was completely dumbfounded. He did not see Lin Jintong's death with his own eyes, so he did not know. But now, his third uncle, who was slightly weaker than his father, was pierced through by Chu-Mu's sword right under his nose. Chu-Mu's figure flashed past like a swallow. After avoiding the attack of the evil dragon wholly slaughtering formation, he turned back like a swallow and charged at the formation with his sword. Chapter 1809. The dark evil dragon, which was dozens of meters long, roared and tore through the void with its sharp claws. It left a ghastly sight. Under the claws, Chu-Mu's body was as nimble as a swallow. He leapt up and down like a swallow returning to its nest. He was shockingly sharp, as if he had become one with the 2 swords in his hands. Using the heart to control the swords, the heart and the sword were one. Meteor! Suemo shouted, and the blaze spiritual sword turned into meteors. 13 of them broke through the void. The 13 meteor-like sword light were the same size and bright. It was not the first to the 13th strike of the 13 meteor strikes, but the same 13th strike. Chu-Mu used them at the same time and shot them at different locations of the dark evil dragon. After Suemo mastered the 13 meteor strikes, the sword skill vision appeared. Under the heart and the sword as one, the 13 meteor strikes merged into one and gave birth to the more powerful 14th strike. The sword skill rose from the second rate to the first rate. The inspiration for the sword skill surged in Sumo's mind like a flood. He had grasped the essence of the 13 meteor strikes and surpassed it, reaching a whole new level. On the basis of becoming a first-rate martial artist, he had improved again, nearing the peak of first rate. If Chu-Mu was willing, he could even spend a bit more time in the future to raise this sword technique to a super flow sword technique. He could control it as he wished. Unknowingly, Suemo had a deeper understanding of the heart and the sword as one. The range of the sword skill had increased from 3 meters to 4 meters. The dark evil dragon was dozens of meters long. There wasn't much difference between 4 meters and 3 meters. Of course, if the opponent was only one person, there would be a huge difference between 4 meters and 3 meters. The 13 powerful sword lights hit different parts of the dark evil dragon's body. They didn't cause any damage to the dark evil dragon, but to a certain extent, they made the dark evil dragon's body tremble slightly. This was enough. 14th strike. With another shout, the eternal spiritual sword trembled. The sword light was ferocious, sharp, and direct. It pierced through the void and transformed into the most resplendent light. In an instant it was as if night had fallen. Only that beam of light was the most dazzling, attracting the attention of everyone. This move had reached the peak of first-class sword technique. It instantly pierced through one of the dark evil dragon's eyes and into its body. Roar. The dark evil dragon was severely injured. It let out a mournful roar as its body trembled. The faces of the 9-star Saint experts who were constructing the evil dragon's Saint slaughtering array changed. They could only feel a tyrannical force rushing towards them. It was almost impossible to resist. Under the ingenuity of the battle formation, this force was weakened and diverted, and they had to bear it together. The sword did not manage to defeat the dark evil dragon, but it managed to injure it. It also affected the 9-peak 9-star Saint level powerhouses who were constructing the evil dragon Saint slaughtering formation. It caused the battle formation to become sluggish in an instant, and a flaw was revealed. Chu Mu had some attainments in the art of deciphering battle formations, and his grasp of timing was unique. He immediately grasped the fleeting opportunity and attacked again. Both swords attacked from the front and back. The 14th strike of the 13 meteor strikes burst out. 2 beams of sword light, one in front and one behind, pierced through the void and shot in different directions. They were 2 9-star Saint-level pinnacle powerhouses. Dodge! No. As they screamed in panic, the 2 9-star Saint-level pinnacle powerhouses could not dodge in time. The momentary sluggishness of the battle formation caused a flaw to appear in their coordination. Although it was just a flash, Chu Mu caught it. It was the moment when they could not use the power of the battle formation. With the strength of an ordinary 9-star Saint, it was impossible for them to block Chu Mu's sword. To be safe, Chu Mu immediately attacked with the 14th strike. Its speed was extremely fast. In terms of absolute speed, the 14th strike of the 13 meteor strikes was even faster than the cloud-piercing sword form. There was no way to dodge it. The heads of the 2 9-star Saint-level pinnacle powerhouses were instantly pierced through by the dazzling sword light. They were smashed, and even their primordial spirits were destroyed. With 2 dead, the evil dragon Saint slaughtering array collapsed. Both swords vibrated, and the 13 meteor strikes were used again. Sword light shot out. In an instant, the remaining 5 9-star Saint-level pinnacle powerhouses were all killed by Chu Mu's sword. Their primordial spirits were also collected by Chu Mu. The primordial spirits of these people were at least at the peak of the 4th tier. Some were even at the beginning of the 5th tier. They were perfect for using the great art of soul ignition and spiritual awakening to promote the maturity of the Heaven Wasteland puppet's intelligence. From start to finish, less than 15 minutes had passed. It was incomparably intense and soul-stirring. No one could take their eyes off it, and they completely forgot about everything else until they were all killed. Let's go. On the evil dragon hall's side, the few people who had left the Black God's secret realm woke up. Their expressions changed drastically. In their extreme shock, they did not care about the spatial cracks that could appear anywhere in the void. They directly exploded with all their strength, turning it into speed, and flew into the air. Perhaps if they were lucky, they would not encounter any spatial cracks. However, if they stayed, they would definitely die. Hence, it was worth a gamble. However, how could Chu Mu let them leave alive? With a wave of his sword light tore through the air like a meteor chasing after the moon. With astonishing speed, it instantly pierced through the people who were flying into the air, including Lin Ziki. If Lin Jintong knew that his only son, Lin Ziki, whom he would rather self-detonate to protect, would not be able to escape death in the end, and die under Chu Mu's sword at that, who knew how unwilling he would be. Corpses fell from the sky one after another. Even their primordial spirits could not escape. They were directly captured by Chu Mu, their consciousness shattered and collected. At this point, the people of the evil dragon hall who had come here had all been killed. Not a single one survived. Spatial rings fell into Chu Mu's hands one after another. These were his spoils of war. The sword used by the evil dragon hall's third palace master, Wu Yuzi, was also a spiritual sword, a low-grade spiritual sword. After collecting his spoils of war, Chu Mu also realized that his current strength was much stronger than when he had fought with Lin Jintong. Although his opponents were equivalent to two Dark Star Sword Saints, they were not as strong as Lin Jintong. Battle formations had their strong points, but they also had their weaknesses. To deal with someone like Chu Mu who had studied battle formations and had great attainments in breaking them, unless it was an extremely profound and powerful battle formation, its power would be reduced. For example, this evil dragon slaughtering holy formation was the evil dragon hall's battle formation. It could not be said to be weak. Unfortunately, the evil dragon slaughtering holy formation constructed by 9 people was not the complete version. Secondly, their mastery of it was not profound enough. Thus, during the battle, Chu Mu found a trace of its weakness and gradually broke it. What terrifying strength! What a terrifying person! Dead. They're all dead. This time, the evil dragon hall's losses are incomparably heavy. I'm afraid they can no longer maintain their position in Zhanlong City. In an instant 2 Dark Star Sword Saints and 9 ordinary Peak 9-star Saint rank Evil Dragon Secret Guardians had died. Even the chosen geniuses to enter the Black God's secret realm had all died. Such losses would make even the 5 City Lord mansions go crazy, let alone the Evil Dragon Hall. Everyone could imagine that when the Evil Dragon Hall learned of what had happened here, they would definitely be furious. After that, they would probably take revenge regardless of everything. Some people couldn't help but feel excited in their hearts. Next, it's very likely that there will be chaos. The 6 stars looked at Chu Mu with burning gazes. This was a powerful opponent, an opponent that they believed they could not defeat at the moment. The Evil Dragon Hall was the Evil Dragon Hall, and other forces were other forces. Perhaps there were forces that were on good terms with the Evil Dragon Hall, but under such circumstances, they would not be stupid enough to stand out. Did they not see that the powerful Evil Dragon Hall had been slaughtered? After the trip to the Black God's secret realm had ended and such a big incident had happened. After the shock, everyone left one after another. One could imagine that it wouldn't take long for this news to spread throughout the land of exile. After all, it would cause a storm. Brother Chu, if you need it, you can take this token to the black market of the 5 great cities. Zhao Wuji walked over and handed a black token to Chu Mu as he said sincerely. Chu Mu glanced at it, but didn't refuse and put it away. The difference in strength between you and me is too great. However, I will catch up. One day I will definitely challenge you again. After saying that, Zhao Wuji quickly left. Chu Mu glanced at the black token in his hand. There were only 2 words on it, Wuji. Black market. Chu Mu muttered. He couldn't help but have a guess. This Zhao Wuji came from the black market, and probably had a very high position in the black market. The reason why Zhao Wuji gave him this token was probably because he knew that he would have to suffer the revenge of the Evil Dragon Palace. As a powerful force that was only second to the 5 City Lord mansions, even though the Evil Dragon Palace had suffered a great loss due to the deaths of some of their masters, its foundation was still very shocking. Not to mention others, just the first palace master of the Evil Dragon Palace was a well-known Bright Moon Sword Saint, and his strength was very terrifying. Facing the enraged Evil Dragon Palace, the current Chu Mu probably couldn't resist at all. Therefore, Zhao Wuji gave Chu Mu this token. He didn't say it clearly, but Chu Mu understood the meaning. When he couldn't deal with the revenge of the Evil Dragon Palace, he could take the token to the black market. Naturally, someone would take him to the black market. In other words, it was equivalent to accepting the protection of the black market. Chu Mu wasn't sure how strong the black market was, but he estimated that it wouldn't be inferior to a major faction like the Evil Dragon Palace. It might even be comparable to the 5 great cities. The Evil Dragon Palace doesn't have an absolute expert overseeing it. What is there to fear? Chu Mu thought to himself. unparalleled sword star. Since it has the name of unparalleled, I will step on the path of unparalleled. The evil dragon palace will be the starting point of my path of unparalleled in the land of exile. Chumu was in high spirits. Even though he knew that the first palace master of the evil dragon palace was a tyrannical bright moon sword saint, he didn't feel afraid. Instead, he felt excited. The evil dragon palace that didn't have an absolute expert could be his opponent. He could leave behind a legend of unparalleled here and return to the deep blue world with great strength.